either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And today we are closing out the most glorious of months before the Christmas holiday finally sets in. And I will accept it in December.
Same. I've already warned the roommates, no Christmas decorations till December 1st.
Yes. And we are closing out Nic Cage November with probably one of the first movies that I realized Nicolas Cage was a big name.
This was, for me, this was my favorite Nicolas Cage movie. Not my first. Mm-hmm. Definitely not like the Cage movie I think of in my head. But if I had to like boil all of them down, this one's my go-to.
I actually think this was probably my first Nicolas Cage movie.
I think a lot of people this was.
Yeah. So, what movie are we talking about today, Chris?
Ghost Rider.
Yeah, one of the earlier Marvel movies.
Yeah, which surprised some people, I think, especially like if you're going backwards through the Marvel collection, how
kind of forgotten this is. Well, ignored. Not forgotten, ignored.
Ignored, because that was something that came up after, like, the last Marvel movie for my friend group who was really into that Marvel universe, was a lot of them were like, well, where do we go from here? Do we add the characters from the comic books? And those who had read them were like, well, we've got so many good ones. We could do this and this and this. And you start digging, you're like, oh, we've already done a lot of these.
Yeah. Well, and so there is something to that, because Ghost Rider has a very specific feel for the era. Because, and I'll get into that right now, because for those who don't know, Ghost Rider is a 2007 superhero movie that was written and directed by Mark Steven Johnson.
Yes, it was.
Who previously had written and directed Daredevil, as well as wrote the screenplay for its pseudo-sequel, Elektra, which I have not seen that.
Haven't seen that one. I will say, though, Daredevil, Ghost Rider, you can see the tie.
Yes. There's a very, it's a specific era of like Marvel still experimenting, trying to figure out what they were going to do for a superhero movie.
And it was also Marvel trying to figure out where the dark line needed to sit. Because they'd had some even darker films before this.
Yeah, they had Blade and Punisher.
Yeah.
And before that, Howard the Duck, which I still need to get to at some point.
Yes. And then like they kind of 180'd it and did some goofier superhero movies after that. And now we've gotten into the kind of like quick flip between goofy and dark themes.
Yeah. And I'll get into a little bit of that specifically towards the end in like the reception of this movie. Yes. Also, there are two westerns from 1935 and 1943 by the same name, not to confuse those together.
No, but I mean, that is kind of the idea of the movie.
Yeah. And so, also, it obviously stars Nicolas Cage.
Why wouldn't it?
Ava Mendes.
Who does a good job.
The legendary Sam Elliott.
Oh, my fave.
And Wes Bentley, who I know very little about.
Once you start seeing him, you start realizing, like, he is in quite a bit, but they're not, like, you're not going to randomly run into him with your genres.
Yeah, I meant to do a little digging on some more of these people, but work's been a bit busy.
Fair, and also, like, these are all big names, but for the most part, they did kind of run in different circles. I think Cage is probably the only name that really ties them together because he works with just about everybody at some point.
Yeah, he's more. I actually kind of wish there was a database of like, you know, the like you're never more than 3 steps away from Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, like there should definitely be like, I'm sure somewhere out there's a graph of like how stars know each other.
Yeah,
and like I feel like Nicolas Cage is tied into a lot more bubbles just because he does take on a lot more roles than a lot of people.
Well, and I mean, like, I forget that he's worked with, like, Elijah Wood, too, and that's, like, how he got into the Spectravision movies is when they were working on, The Heist, I think it was called, something like that. It's not very good, but it's...
But, like, at the same time, like, now he knows Elijah Wood.
Yeah, that's how they're connected. But Cage, actually, I learned through doing research on this that he had previously started work on another Ghost Rider project that fell through.
Yeah, for those of you who don't remember, because it has been a whole year since we ranted about this man, Nic Cage is a giant nerd.
Yeah. He is a big fucking nerd. He has a Ghost Rider tattoo on his shoulder.
And I should preference, he had the tattoo before he got the role for the movie.
Yes, exactly.
Like, this wasn't like the Lord of the Rings tattoos where they're all like, oh, this was a bonding experience, this, like, memory. No, this man is such a nerd that he had a comic book hero that he tattooed on himself and then went to go play it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, he's been wanting to do superhero movies for a long time.
Yeah, and, like, it also kind of adds depth to Cage, too, because, like, we knew that he liked Superman, but that's DC, right? So, the fact that he's not just like, oh, I have a favorite character, because, like, that's more common, I feel like, to have, like, a favorite superhero, because how do you get around not having a superhero at this point?
And I feel, especially back in, like, the early 2000s, we were still kind of in the fandom of, like, either you were all DC, or you were all Marvel, and now it's kind of just blended.
Yeah, and it was a harder line back then, too, to pick a side, because, like, it was easier to see good DC stuff, it was easier to see bad Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
Like, nobody was, like, steamrolling the other yet.
Yeah. And, I get that, so. And, if we haven't made it obviously apparent, Ghost Rider is an adaptation of the Marvel comic of the same name.
Yes.
And as far as I can tell, for the most part, it's based off the first Marvel Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze.
Yes, that one.
And I will say this right from the get-go. I'm not a comic book fan. I didn't really grow up with them, or, in general, a lot of, like, superhero movies aren't really my shtick.
Yeah, fair.
So I have very little knowledge of the series, and I do apologize if I get anything wrong for you comic book nerds out there.
But with that said, Cage did love this character, but he also felt like there was some expanding that could do.
Yeah.
So, like, this movie's not a faithful recreation of the original character.
No, and there's more reasoning to that as well.
For sure.
But I do want to mention that I did a little bit of research on this, and I do think it's interesting that the original Ghost Rider was from the 50s, and was not Marvel. But that comic series was killed due to censorship of the time and was not able to be revived until the 70s when Marvel brought it back.
Yeah, but, I mean, going off of the core parts of Ghost Rider, it makes a little bit of sense. Like, granted, this movie doesn't necessarily visually go super dark with it. They touch it. They get around it. But, like, the core concept of it was, I mean... Yeah,
there's some slightly, like, WC level of, supernatural Christianity dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some imagery. And as well, as we are so great at planning, this is the second movie in a row that is an adaptation, as will be the next one and the first one of the month. So, get ready for a winter of adaptations.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite kind of movie.
Yeah. And so, the movie adaptation is, at its core, the plot is basically a stunt driver makes a deal with Mephistopheles and becomes his lackey to hunt his degenerate son.
Yeah, you know, it's a Western put on motorcycles.
Yes. Actually, this is kind of close to Laffenstein's description, because on his charity stream, someone redeemed him to describe this movie poorly.
Yes.
He is aware that this was already planned ahead of time, and it was a good stream. It was a good charity. It was a home for every child. So
good, yeah.
Met his goal.
Nice.
The highest level of donate, or highest amount the charities received from a stream donation, so...
Nice.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, check out his stream regularly anyways.
Yeah.
So, but, anywho. So, the director, Johnson, had always liked Ghost Rider, and because of the visuals of Ghost Rider, and I've seen some of them, he never felt he was used in the right way.
Yeah, and I can totally see that.
Mm-hmm. And he also mentioned that in writing the screenplay, it was very difficult because there was too much canon, and the stories didn't have enough meat to their arcs that could be developed into a full film, and so he had to trim it down to what he called the essential elements, and his breakthrough moment was when he thought for Ghost Rider to become the devil's bounty hunter to give him a purpose, instead of just being some random nighttime vigilante.
Yeah, and it also kind of... Granted, back then set him apart a little bit better from several other, like, generic dark vigilante types.
Yeah.
Bounty hunting kind of sidestepped the whole, like, why are you out in the middle of the night fighting people?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a good basic premise. I mean,
no, it definitely works.
Well, and on top of that, because, like, Daredevil's a lawyer.
Yes.
And a lot of these other superheroes are just kind of like, they're born into it, or they're trying to return to something, or fix something in their lives.
Yes.
Whereas Ghost Rider is kind of a consequence of his actions, like...
Yeah, and also, something that I like very much about this movie that I don't love a whole lot about, especially more recent superhero movies, is there is a very mild role in him trying to not be Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
Like, it's talked about, it's mentioned, it's definitely addressed, so you're not left wondering how Flaming Skull Man lives his daily life.
Yeah.
But it's not also, like, a key factor.
Yeah, there's also a level of, like, youthfulness to this, even though Cage isn't the youngest looking ever.
No, but especially going back and looking, you're like, oh, look at babyface Cage.
Yeah, I'm speaking in, like, the terms of the feel of the movie.
Definitely. Like, they picked it seems odd, especially for people who aren't super into Cage, like we are, that Cage is a good fit, but he really is.
Yeah.
Because Ghost Rider, Daredevil sometimes feels very similar.
Yeah.
But Ghost Rider, he's not really meant to be like the handsome, charming man. He's a stunt performer for a carny show.
Yeah.
Like, he's good enough looking. He's not bad looking, but he's also not Superman.
No,
he's a flaming skull on fire.
Exactly. And as we mentioned, Cage had wanted to do Ghost Rider for a while, but I think part of the reason, like, he was also selected, Johnson mentioned that Cage already kind of is Johnny Blaze in real life.
Yeah,
like,
the personalities are very similar.
As far as I'm aware.
We don't know him, but...
I don't know the comics, so this is my only Ghost Rider to go off of.
The fact that Cage was able to interpret more into the character as opposed to just being able to recreate him, I think says a lot about how he felt like he was connected to Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
Which a lot of actors talk about, like, how they need to find and discover that to really give a good performance. I think it was a natural pick for Cage since he already had that level of connection. He's like, I've already done the assignment. I've already done all the research.
You've just made me think of that stupid TikTok trend. I understood the assignment.
Yeah, Cage understood.
Yes. And also, Sam Elliott was excited to work with Cage, too.
Yeah,
so.
And there is definitely some, like, good play that you can see in this movie, because even though it's, by nowadays standard, like, it's a little rough.
Yeah.
But there's enough, like, fun and play where you can see that between both of them, they have gone back and forth on something to get it just right.
Yeah.
And especially if you get a chance to listen to the commentaries that are on the DVD, those are actually pretty good and pretty insightful. Yeah,
and speaking of commentaries, I do want to mention my sources for this episode. Commentary from writer and director Mark Steven Johnson, visual effects supervisor Kevin Mack, producer Gary Foster, as well as various cast and crew interviews. And on top of that, we are reviewing the extended edition.
We are, which I actually, for once, recommend for a dumb superhero action movie.
Yeah.
Because the parts that they cut, not necessary, but they do fill in some of the very big plot holes.
Yeah, and there's some little, like, side jokes that are better off in the movie.
It definitely flows better.
Yeah. And before we dive in, Chris, what are we drinking today?
While we're not going to drink the entire bottle, we do have red wine today.
Yes, specifically Apothic Inferno.
Ooh.
That was just perfect. I had to pick it up, so cheers.
Cheers. Yeah.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Not great, but not bad.
I've had worse. Recently.
Your husband has brought over worse.
He's not good at picking wine.
No, he's not. And so, into Ghost Rider we go.
Yes.
We open with a prologue explaining the legend of the Ghost Rider.
Spoken, and of course, the only voice that could have spoken.
Sam Elliott. The West was built on legends.
It's
a great fucking line.
And honestly, like, if the movie had tried to steer far away from, like, the Western influence of Ghost Rider, it would have just been kind of weird. The fact that they just spend so much time hand-holding you into the, like, Old West themes, I really like. I
do, too. And it was done very intentionally, because that was part of wanting Ghost Rider to bring it up, keep its ties to its origins, but also try and bring it up to a more modern time frame.
Yeah, and it also just felt like a good evolution, like, to its own story.
Yeah.
Like, you can't forever have a flaming horse.
Yeah, it's kind of like how, honestly, Lord of the Rings wouldn't be as good without its opening prologue.
Yeah.
Just because there's a lot to get set up, and there's a lot to go over.
Yeah, and that whisper ASMR at the beginning is just so good.
Yeah. So, but on top of that, I do also like it because it's a foreshadowing and setting up the Ghost Rider and Mephistopheles dynamic.
I also really like it because we, from the get-go, get to understand what level of visuals we're going to be expecting through this movie. Because while they are over the top, there's a lot of CG, the level of detail in the CG is actually really impressive.
Yes.
And we get that from the beginning.
Yeah. And especially for a 2007 movie.
Yes, and...
Because I was still I was either a junior or sophomore in high school.
And you have to remember, superhero movies back then didn't look good.
Yeah.
Like, there was not a good-looking superhero film that you were like, wow, this is, like, a national treasure level, beautiful film that we're gonna all worship someday. They were all just okay.
Yeah, and, like, I think comic book-wise movies that I'm familiar with, like, Sin City was
considered, big. Like, the cinematic masterpiece because it chose to, like, go out of its way to be the red and the black and the white. And, like, there was some that chose to be more leaning into the comic book style, but there wasn't a whole lot of ones that, like, just
were grounded.
Were grounded and also, like, put in the details.
Yeah. That
were, like, just, like, so many details throughout the whole movie. They might be visually different, but not necessarily, like, dense.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, real quick, I know we vaguely touched on this concept before, and we've referenced it, and I can't remember what episode. But this, the origin of this type of dynamic, but to reiterate, it's called a Faustian Bargain, in which Mephistopheles is a demon from German folklore that originated in the Faust legend, in which the alchemist Johann Georg Faust makes a deal with the devil for his soul, and Mephistopheles acts as the devil's agent.
Yep.
And also, I'll do this real quick, and then we'll get back into it, because I do think history and this stuff's interesting.
No, it is, because I think, especially if you don't know it, it is too easy to replace, because they don't say their names super often, to just replace him with the devil.
Yeah.
And, like, you're not wrong to do so, but there is another level of depth that you could throw in there if you felt like it.
Yeah, exactly. And though this concept is older, the precursor to Faust, at least in Christian mythology, appears in the 6th century in the form of Theophilus.
Sure.
He was some monk who supposedly sold his soul to the devil. That's
he did a real hard 180 there.
Yeah, and I mean that's our earliest reference that we know of, but it was for a quick explanation. It was popularized because Faust, the legend was supposedly lived somewhere between 1466 and 1541, but the story was published by Historia von Johann Faust, or published in Historia von die Hausen in 1587. Yeah. But it didn't become popularized until the 17th century in 1604 by the two play. Well, first off, 1604 in the play The Tragical History of Die Faustus, and 1604 Johann Wolfgang von Goethe Faust in 1808 and 1832. Yeah. But I would love to go into more detail. I'm not going to bore you anymore, but I'll save it for when we actually do go into another, more specifically Faust movie.
Sure.
So, but I thought it was important to bring up that this dynamic is something that, while interesting, is a very, very old concept.
Oh, for sure. And this movie's going to continue to play off of not just this legend, but it's going to throw in as many as possible, really.
Exactly. And it's also important to mention that from the beginning, the director wanted to fuse a classic Western with a Hammer horror feature.
Which definitely hit the Western. The Hammer horror for 2007, I'll give him.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I think we could have gone a little harder.
Yeah, for movie nerds, it wouldn't be as noticeable.
No, but it's in the background, which is, I think, at the time anyway, what gave a lot of us the connection to this movie. Like, a lot of 13-year-olds walked out of this movie theater being like, that was the coolest movie I've ever seen.
Oh, totally. Except for my brother. He hates this movie. And for those unfamiliar, as I'm also only still casually familiar with the Hammer horror features. They're a British production company that is best known for their horror and fantasy films from the 50s to the 70s. And many of their films, or a few of their films, started the career of Christopher Lee.
Which we all know and love.
Yeah, as another Lord of the Rings character.
Of course.
Yeah. And so, as well, Cage and Johnson embrace the classic creature features. So there are some elements that feel like Dracula trying to climb back to his coffin kind of thing.
There's some very heavy old Frankenstein, old Dracula styling to this movie.
Yes. And if anyone wants my opinions on those, I've been continuing our classic monster features on our Instagram, TGTBTW_podcast.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm coming to the end of that. I'm in the decline era before we hit the Abbott and Costello.
You let me know when you get to Abbott and Costello. I think you might enjoy them.
I will. It'll probably be after the Thanksgiving holiday.
That's fair.
Yeah. And also, Johnson said they needed the prologue because there's a lot to explain before
there really is.
Just diving right in.
And the other thing that this movie had to try and wrangle with is, while this was a visual medium going to another visual medium, the concepts are fairly vague.
Mm-hmm.
And not just in selling your soul to the devil, how do you visually show that contract and all that, but also the superpowers that we're about to be handed. Little challenging to just throw an audience in and expect them to get without a little bit of dialogue.
And unfortunately, the vagueness for me is something that distracts from the movie a bit.
A little bit, yeah.
And I'll get into that more as we go on, because there's a lot the movie covers, but also doesn't, and not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also to be mentioned, the night shots, the reason they look the way they are is because the director wanted to make the night shots look the way the human eye sees it instead of how the camera sees it.
Which I think for the most part looks pretty good for this movie. It's a little awkward because we have so many other night action, kind of grungy, kind of in the motorcycle leather realm. So it, especially at the beginning, starts to sway a little bit into some of those others. Granted, a lot of those came later.
Yeah. Or earlier, too. There was that whole motorcycle craze.
That's true. Motorcycles were a thing for a while.
Yeah, which we'll actually mention one of the most famous ones.
Definitely.
So, which I actually learned something interesting. I read a book on when I was on my way out to Oregon. Akira Manga Revolution. Mm-hmm. I learned the movie that I'm going to bring up in a little bit, was one of the inspirations for the biker gangs of Japan of the 60s that inspired parts of Akira.
The idea of the American biker gang. What won't they touch?
I don't know.
I don't either.
And so, from this, we cut to the opening credits that's riding through hell.
They're cool. It was 2007. Your intro thing had to be cool.
Yeah. Also, this is the second Cage movie we've covered that involves hell, vehicles, and kind of a bounty hunter. Yeah.
And He's got a style.
Yeah, one of our very first ones, our very first Nic Cage November, Drive Angry.
Another solid movie.
Yes.
It's very similar.
Yeah, we totally planned this stuff out so well.
Whoops.
And so from this opening credits, nothing of much note, but we do cut to a circus and slash fair that Johnny Blaze is and his dad is performing, but he's showing off to a pretty young thing out in the out in the
very
stands.
Stereotypical. Like, young, doesn't look anything like Nicolas Cage child, but has a prosthetic nose, so from the side,
yes,
he does look a little bit like him.
I was saving that for a little bit later, but yes, the young Johnny Blaze has a fake nose to fit Cage's more nose, because the actor has more of a button nose.
Yes. Okay, not gonna lie, as someone who has very bad face blindness, I have spent most of my movie watching life accepting that if the director says, this is child so-and-so, and then in a couple scenes they go, and this is adult so-and-so, I just go, yes, it is. Of course it is. No questions asked. This is one of the few movies where I go, that is not the same man.
Yeah.
But do I really care?
No.
I don't. I don't
No.
give two shits.
Well, I think part of the reason it stands out is because the actresses who portray Roxy are
They're
very close. They look like they could be either like sisters, or they look like they could have grown up to be that person.
Yes, and it is one of those awkward things too, because like, I think especially going from like a little bit awkward looking teenager to either awkward adult or good looking adult is an easy like flip for most people to be like, oh yeah, you just had your glow up in adulthood. But to go from really good, pretty good looking teenager to one of the better looking Nicolas Cage, but still Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
I think is the flip that people have a hard time with. It's not unrealistic.
No.
But it's Nicolas Cage. His face is just so recognizable.
Oh, yeah. Well, like, what was it? I saw that he's going to be in a new movie that's an adaptation of, speaking of adaptations, of, I think it's a book called Butcher's Crossing, where he plays a buffalo hunter.
Ooh.
Shaved. His head shaved, and he's got a big beard, and he looks rugged and dope.
You know, okay. I think Cage is one of the few actors who, like, could benefit very heavily from just being the bearded guy.
Yeah.
Like, maybe that's his future.
Yeah, because, like, what was it? I was watching Joe, which, turns out is actually a really good movie. His beard isn't that distracting. There's just that one...
there's the one scene.
There's just that one photo of, like, the promotion photo, and it's just like, your beard looks really bad, man.
Yeah, I remember seeing that photo and being like, I know that's his real beard, but man, it doesn't look great.
No, not at all.
Yeah, okay. I think this is a Cage specific problem though, because this is a multiple movie thing. Mm-hmm. Cage's look is so specific to Cage that even when he tries to change his look for the movie he's in, people assume the change is fake. Yeah. Because we are so used to looking at Cage. And
there is another thing that comes down to that a little bit later down the line.
I would argue that even his hair in this feels off. You're like, that's not Nic Cage's hair. Yeah. But it is. It is.
It's like, I think part of it is partially like Con Air kind of thing. Of like, everyone just assumes like that we have that image of like the first Cage movie we saw kind of thing.
Oh, for sure. So like, for most people, Nic Cage from National Treasure is forever Nic Cage.
Yeah, now that I'm realizing that his hair doesn't change that much between roles.
No, I mean, how many ways can you style short and thin?
Yeah, especially with like his receding hairline that has not receded.
It's just stayed the same for 30 years. Yeah. But with all that said, does young fake Cage do a good job? Yeah. Yeah. He's pretty believable for like a carny kid.
And that's the reason they chose him, because there was another actor who the director said that he looked more like Cage.
Okay.
But they chose the better actor.
I think it's a good choice. Yeah. Even though like a lot of people gripe about that. Mm-hmm. He does a really good job. He's a good teenage looking actor.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, what I like about this opening is we're getting really kind of the dynamic. Because this is a weirdly paced movie.
It is.
Because this is establishing young hotshot with daddy issues. It sets up fatherly advice that's going to soon to be ignored. Yep. And on top of that, this whole set was built at the entire circus or the fairground.
Yeah.
Because, this is set in Texas.
It is set kind of in Texas, and I will bitch about that later.
All right. And so from here, we cut to a bit of a bonding moment between father and son. The kid's caring. He's getting rid of this. He's trying to sneakily toss the smokes away.
Yeah,
Dad's giving advice. He's kind of being a stick in the mud, but he understands his son's gonna do what he wants.
How much money do you think... I think it's Malibu is the cigarette brand. They bother to put the brand on the cigarettes. To a character who is actively dying of the cigarettes. I feel like that was bad promotional setting. Because they had to ask. Yeah. They had to get permission.
Yeah, because this is still back, I think, in some place. No, because they started getting rid of that in the early 2000s of, like, being able to, like, smoke at restaurants and stuff.
Yeah.
But when this is set, like, this is...
This is supposed to be, I think, in the 70s-ish, maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
It's definitely got those Evel Knievel vibes. Back when, like, people would have recognized a stunt, like, a Carney-style stuntman as, like, a thing to see, whereas nowadays it's like, if they're there, I will go, but I don't follow a... Yeah, and that's another weird part to this movie, too, that's down the line. It is. It's definitely like, the monster truck taking completely over the stuntman.
Yeah, it's not a hot rod movie.
It's not a hot rod movie.
Yeah, it's a weirdly placed one, kind of.
It is, but you also don't really question it because it's a motorcycles-based stuntman. You're just like, yeah, okay, I know there's been a few. Just whenever those happened, that's when this is.
Well, we still have, like, the street performers who, like, rent out a public square. They've got, like, the cage, or, like, they've got the loop thing that you can pay to loop a hold on.
Yeah, it's definitely still a thing, but I feel like there was, like, a peak of, like, extremes.
Yeah.
And now we've got the Monster Extreme Sports or whatever it's called, Triple X Sports.
Yeah,
and, like, we've gotten to a point where the stunts that they're pulling off...
X Games, Triple X is the movie. that's inspired by the X Games.
That's it. We've reached a point where, like, you have to literally jump out of space for people to be like, oh, you were the guy who jumped out of space.
And even then, I have no clue what he looks like.
Oh, I don't either, but I remember him doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but... From this, Johnny and Roxy go to a tree on a hill where Johnny is cheesily carving his name on a tree. And
I appreciate that during the commentary, the director was like, is this cheesy? Yes, I wanted it to be. Stop complaining about it. This is what I wanted.
Oh yeah, it's a fucking comic book movie.
It's cheesy as hell.
Yeah, all comic book movies to a point are cheesy, and that's why they're comic book movies.
I think people weren't expecting it because we do spend... not a lot of time with teenage, younger Ghost Rider, but we spend enough time with young Johnny.
We kind of spend quite a bit of time with him.
We do. And young Johnny reminds me of, like, Spider-Man. In, like, he's dumb, he's young, he, like, doesn't have superpowers yet, but he can jump a motorcycle over some cars.
And I will actually get into that, because I have a thought on, like, why, like, Sam Raimi Spider-Man is so beloved, and this one's kind of like, you exist, kind of.
Yeah.
But... Anywho, she tells him the bad news that my pa is going to make me go live with my mama.
Oh, no.
And he's like...
And do they run away immediately together? No.
He's like, well, I'll plan it. We'll leave.
We gotta go pack my 2 shirts.
Yeah. Fun fact, the tree and the flowers in this scene are fake. And they had to constantly scare away kangaroos from the background because this was on a, like, nature sanctuary in Australia.
Of course it is.
This movie was mainly shot in Australia.
And I love how proud the director is of, like, how much this looks like Texas to him. And for the most part, you don't really care.
Yeah.
The motorcycles, you're like, yeah, it's Texas.
It feels like the stereotypical West.
Yes. But if you were to, like, still it and be like, where is this? It's not Texas.
No.
It's not.
No.
But I appreciate how proud he was of the fact that, to him, this looked like Texas.
Oh, yeah. No, and, I mean, it's not bad.
It's not bad. It feels westerny. Yeah. And in Australia's defense, they also are westerny in a way.
It depends on where you're...
If you're scaring away kangaroos with an air gun, you're Texas-y. Thank you.
Yeah, very Texas-y. And so the two plan to leave, but Johnny learns his father is dying, and he can't abandon him.
Surprise! The man who smokes has cancer.
Yeah. I like this setup, because also it's showing, like, their living conditions.
Yes.
And it's really showing, like, his growth in the soon-to-have time jump.
Yes, and I also appreciate that, like, this is a, like, proper rock and a hard place sort of scenario, whereas a lot of the, like, supposed dilemmas that especially young superheroes are supposed to be put in.
Yeah.
Most people are like, oh, well, that's a dumb question. This one feels like a proper, like, oh, do I stay for my dad's last days, or do I run away with my girlfriend who, in theory, I could still talk to, but I'm dumb and young and don't realize I could just call her.
Or could just drive off to see her in the sunset. Like, I know where her mom lives. Like,
yeah, like, you can write her a letter.
Yeah. And this is back in the day when that was still really, really probably romantic.
Yeah, like, but he's young and dumb, and, like, this feels like a proper teenage problem to have to struggle with.
Young, dumb, and full of the fires of youth.
Yes.
I'm not going there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Accurate.
So, Johnny goes to blow off steam. As a mysterious man with the power to explode light bulbs appears.
Yeah. Okay, I am torn because I love the imagery of this devil, like, interpretation of walking devils from this movie. I really like most of the interpretation for it. There are some parts that I have questions on their powers.
Yeah.
But at the same time, especially here, especially at the beginning, I don't care. It just looks cool.
It looks cool. It is a great shot, and I think, like, I don't remember, like, this being, like, a big trope until, like, Supernatural.
No, I mean, like, a Southern Gothic, like, the sweet man coming to sweet talk you devil, that's not necessarily new, but it definitely wasn't, like, a hard and fast rule yet.
Yeah.
Like, a demon usually was less
suave.
Clearly a demon, but suave.
Like the Primus Devil Goes Down to Georgia cover, that music video.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the only part I remember, specifically the director talking about, like, the extended part of the scene. Yeah, I know he talks about it more, but this one was memorable because I do like this part, and I wish it was kept in the original, because he walks by, like, a horror house, and there's the stereotypical devil, and he's like, nice. And just keeps going.
And I also appreciate that the director takes time to admit that they went with this styling because he is trying to fit into the Texas Western stylings of the devil. And
specifically, like, kind of the commercialized Johnny Cash devil.
Exactly. Yeah. Very, very much so. And the director admitting that if this had been placed somewhere else, he would have gone with a different look, because that's the whole idea of the devil and the demons in this world. Yeah.
And also, I know it's kind of cheesy now because we see it used over and over again. Yeah. But, like, his flashing and, like, showing, like, his true, like, decrepit form.
Yes. And, like, granted, it is overdone now, but I feel like it's really overdone in, like, the TV shows. Yeah. And so it's kind of nice to see a bigger budget done to it, because, like, in the TV shows, you're like, oh, that was a cool effect. Little weak, but cool. Yeah. This one definitely didn't age great, but it does still look cool.
Yeah. And, I mean...
it definitely feels like they put in a lot more effort and details into those little quick moments.
Yeah. And, I mean, say what you will about, like, Supernatural or whatever, but, like, they have probably one of the best, like, death entrances.
Oh, 100%. And this very much is reminiscent.
Yeah. Even though I think the Supernatural one came later.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. So, but either way, Mephistopheles is here to make a deal. He'll, heal Papa Blaze. I like that, Papa Blaze.
It's very... yep.
In exchange for, Johnny's freedom and his soul.
Bum.
Also, Johnny definitely feels like very much Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Oh, 110%. But, like, if it didn't, it would almost be insulting.
Yeah.
Like, it's a kind of soft category of this idea of Southern Gothic. And this movie, this devil, is hard leaning into that stylings. And so if you don't acknowledge some of those roots, it just kind of feels empty.
And kind of half-assed.
Yeah, and so the fact that they go ahead and lean into it, and we've started to incorporate some of the, not necessarily, like, metal sections that come later in the movie.
Yeah.
But, like, start incorporating them a little bit at the beginning, like the skull detail on his cane being a shiny silver as opposed to a wood one.
Yeah, it's not, we haven't entered the Disturbed album cover
not yet.
territory yet, so, but obviously Johnny makes the deal, because otherwise the movie goes nowhere.
And, you know, it is funny because a lot of people, way after this movie came out, when you rewatch it with those friends who have to point out the dumb stuff in a movie, a lot of them are going to be like, that contract wouldn't hold up in a court of law. He didn't sign that.
I mean...
he didn't get to read that.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean,
it's cool. The idea of, like, the full and total trick play into this movie well.
Well, actually, I mean, it would hold up in a court of law because of, at least spiritually in the devil's court of law.
Oh, yeah.
But I when I worked for a credit card company, for their bank, I legitimately had a guy who, didn't read his contract, signed it, and then got pissy the first month because he didn't pay it off in full. And he's like, well, where do you get the right to charge me interest and late fees? And I'm not exaggerating his voice. This is how this dude talked to me. Like, well, you signed the contract. That's where it legally says that we can do this. And he's like, no one reads that. That's what you signed to get free money. I'm like, Jesus Christ, there are people who should not have credit cards.
Fact. However, the man did actually sign and didn't accidentally cut his finger and drip blood onto the paper.
Yeah. True. I don't know. I didn't have the contract. He might have well.
That's true. But it does kind of end up playing nicely into, like, if you're a movie theorist, how the loophole later on can play out. Because in theory, Johnny didn't sign for this.
He signed with his DNA.
Yeah. So he now has no soul, theoretically. Congrats. But he has a dad. Yeah. Dad's dead. Yeah. And his dad somehow managed to get x-rays in record freaking time.
Yeah, right in the morning.
Holy shit.
I've been meaning to tell you, son, I've been sick for a long time, but I went and got my x-rays this morning. It's all gone.
9 a.m. and they are already done. No. So that is the most unbelievable part of this whole movie.
Maybe because maybe not, because we don't know what time it is. It's pretty bright out. It could be like an early noon show.
You've been to the doctor's office. You know damn well that doctor has not reviewed those x-rays yet.
True.
Even if he went at like 4 a.m. No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I prefer, the first time I watched this, I assumed that the doctor, like, re-picked up the old x-rays and they had, like, magically gotten rid of the cancer off the old ones, and the doctor had to call and be like, I made a mistake. Yeah. I'm so wrong. That's what I would like, but, like, they don't say. Yeah. I'd like to think that whatever weird hellscape this lives in has really fast and efficient healthcare.
Maybe.
That feels like a good barter.
Yeah. And so we do get a little bit of a nice moment here too, because Johnny is, now that his dad's fine, he's going to leave, and we're revealed that his motives, like, while he does care for his dad, he's still a teenager at heart. Yeah. He did it for other reasons.
Exactly. And it also is a really nice dynamic between father and son. Mm-hmm. It toes the line between hard-ass dad and, like, caring dad, like, pretty nicely.
Yeah, because he tosses him the keys to take the nice bike in, because it's going to be faster. At least he'll get a little bit of a head start.
Yeah, and, you can see some of the backstory that was put in on the father of, like, oh, he was the same way when he was young. Yeah. Like, who's he to tell his son not to be exactly like him?
Yeah, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
No.
Yeah. And so, as Johnny gets ready to leave, you know what they say about old men with cancer?
Oh, I don't know what.
They don't grow old.
They don't grow old.
It's a bad.
I thought you were going to say they die in motorcycle accidents at the circus.
No, it's my adapting of you know what they say about kids with cancer joke.
Oh yes, well.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it now.
Yeah. I know, I'm not very funny.
It's okay. But yeah, no, like, Johnny hasn't even finished pushing the bike out of the circus, and his father explodes? Question mark?
Falls.
He falls into the fire, but there's an explosion. He's dead.
There's an accident.
There's an accident and your pa's dead.
I'm sorry, Johnny.
But he does get one last chance to cradle his father and then immediately blame the demon that he was dumb enough to make a deal with.
Yep. Tries to run off and fucks up a really shitty Oculus slide.
Yeah, but, you know, it does break up the monotonous, like, how are we going to get him to a crossroad?
Yeah.
Without, like, having to try too hard.
Yeah, because now we're told, like, here's the contract, here's the deal. He gets infused with hellfire by Mephistopheles at the very stereotypical crossroad.
Yes, I do like how our demon friend is telling him to forget things from his past life. And the first one he mentions is, forget all your friends, and it just shows Johnny looking at himself. Does Johnny not have any friends?
Probably not.
Man, that's a sad kid.
Yeah, no wonder he likes Roxy so much. It's the only person giving him attention besides his dad.
Man, this kid needs to get out more.
Yeah, I feel you, Johnny. But after he's been given the whatnot, we get actually a kind of cool cloud storm shot.
It's pretty nice. Especially for 2007, granted this movie had a decent budget, but it's not it's not nowadays Marvel money.
No.
This is old Marvel money.
Yeah, back when they were still like, oh, we'll give you some money.
We'll cut this scene because it costs too much Marvel money.
Yeah, pre-Iron Man money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So this looks really good for that.
Yep, and now we get a very cheesy, rainy scene
God,
of
it's so cheesy.
Johnny deciding to leave Roxy behind.
He drives to the tree, doesn't say anything, looks at her, and then drives away in the rain. And she's just stuck standing there with wet bags, being like, well, shit.
And now I gotta explain to my dad why I'm so wet and I got bags with me.
God damn it, I walked all the way out here.
Johnny, you some real baggage right now. And from this, we now cut to Johnny, a star.
Yes.
Jumping semi-trucks.
Yeah, he's cool, isn't he? Nicolas Cage is really cool in this movie.
You're such a little dipshit. But, I mean, for a first movie, I mean, it does take, like, quite a bit to get to adult Johnny, because, I mean, well, and
granted, like, backstory wasn't, like, a huge part of a superhero in 2007 and before. Like, it was part of it, and if you were, like, redoing a superhero, you bothered to do their backstory. That, like, the second movie was backstory material.
Well, and
we
so...
get it pretty early.
Okay, and so here's where I have kind of this is where I want to talk about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
Yes.
Because at this part, we're 20 minutes into the movie, and we've done a full prologue and technically the origin story.
Yep, it's all here.
Yeah, and that's
and we even know the predecessor story.
Yeah, and so now we're jumping forward, whereas like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, he went from doing like it's all integrated into a continuous storyline. There's no time jump. There's nothing really big, and we even see this later on in Iron Man, where there's not really like the time jumps are like minimal of like maybe he was out for like a few days.
Yeah, a few days, a couple years to like come back, regain our wealth, and now we're suddenly Iron Man.
Yeah, it's not as big of a drastic jump of like going from this Sir Carney to being Johnny Blaze.
Yeah, and it's also an interesting jump because like most of the time our sad backstory, we spend a few minutes on it back then. Like Johnny's dad would have died a lot sooner. Maybe we would have talked about the girlfriend later. Or, a lot of the times, flashbacked halfway through the movie, if you were lucky.
Yeah, or the movie would just be about a young Johnny Blaze.
Yeah, and so I don't hate how much time we spend with young Johnny. In fact, I think it kind of does add quite a bit to this movie. Especially because the details that Cage brings to this character are so... they are refined in such a specific way that now that you have, like, the proper, full, developed child Johnny to work with, it makes adult Johnny make much more sense.
Yeah, and I mean, it is needed to set the story, and like the director said, there was so much he had to work with that, like, he had to, like, get everything shoved into one movie, kind of.
And honestly, it doesn't feel too shovey. I think this is probably one of the better, like, all-in-one encompassing, like, setups.
Yeah, it's not Fantastic Four where there's so much bullshit.
Oh, there's so much bullshit in that movie.
Yeah. Also, in this scene, I've kind of noticed something of, like, how, like, these old metal ballads, like, that used to be controversial and edgy are now kind of, like, the generic, overused, standard. Like, dad rock.
Yeah, no, that's totally dad rock now. But I don't completely hate it.
No.
Mostly because A is his ghostwriter. And, like, what are you expecting?
Yeah.
But also, like, there is a level of, like, Old West feel to some classic rock.
Yeah.
That, like, really translates nicely, especially since, like, we are playing incredibly heavily off of the old Western concepts.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, we're also not, like, going full thrash metal.
No,
like,
this is
Cannibal Corpse.
This is dad metal.
Yeah. But so from here, Johnny does his jump, but he crashes and is good.
He not dead, which is a miracle, but also, like, it's implied that Johnny crashes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, most of the time he's crashing.
Yeah. Am I actually, I think, here's how I think, it would have been better transitioned, I think, as a montage scene.
I would have appreciated seeing him do, like, building up to this jump.
Yeah. Maybe give us another, like, 10 minutes, push the movie to a full 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
And show us, like, the progression from a young Cage Blaze, and just show him moving up to this star status and just crash.
Yeah, because it does feel a little bit like maybe at one point he didn't crash a whole lot, and recently we've had a lot of run-ins with, but, like, they don't address it at all. But a lot of people are here to see him. And people don't want to come, like, that many people do not want to come see a man almost die.
Well, actually, it is implied that, it's mentioned kind of later on when he's at his house, when he's at his flat, because because they can't reuse the bikes because he's crashing them all the time. He's like, oh, you've almost got the full set. It's to the point where, like, that's why people are coming of, like, this is a guy who crashes constantly and is constantly getting up just fine.
Which, I mean, I'm for.
Yeah.
I just would like a tiny little bit of, like, proof.
Yeah, in between story.
Just the smallest hair of, like, how we got from Carney Boy to, like, Evel Knievel level fandom.
Yeah, again, little nods that just don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
That unless you're really paying attention, you're not going to pick up, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I do think from this scene it is shot interestingly.
Yes, I agree.
Because the actual shot of him jumping was done as a continuous shot.
Yes, it's cool.
But it's broken up in the movie, which kind of kills the effect a little bit. But
yeah, I mean, it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, and I mean, the director mentioned that supposedly when Blaze jumps, the slow motion is the only time he's quote unquote free. I personally think this is BS.
Yeah, I was gonna say I did not catch it.
Yeah, but later on he says something different that contradicts it.
It also, like, he spends all of his time in the air flashing back to the most horrible day of his life. Mm-hmm. That doesn't feel like freedom to me.
No.
But, whatever.
Yeah, or the last time he was free kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but there are a couple other things to note in the scene. The head hitting the tire was not planned.
Whoops.
And the stunt guy was fine. Good. But they couldn't cut it out because the stuntman was so proud that that it was in there and he was fine. They
worked a lot with stunt guys for this. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is a full motorcycle movie about a stunt guy.
Yeah.
And the stunt guys for this seem to have had a really great time putting their own accidents into this show. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it worked well. I mean,
it worked really well.
It was a better dynamic than just, like, him falling and rolling.
Yeah, because honestly, like, it's not a, like, subtle, like, oh, if you slow the movie down, you can see where he hits his head. No, it's like tire to the face, which does feel a little bit more like, oh, this man's dead.
Yeah.
That's how you die.
Yeah.
Which adds to the, like, level of, like, oh, wow, he's not dead. That's amazing.
Yeah. Also in this scene, too, if you pay attention to the back, there's a guy getting tackled by security. That also was not planned because
this man was very into this.
It was an extra, and the director he never asked why the guy did it. I guess the guy really wanted to be an extra and wanted to make sure he was shown.
The director spends like all of the background shots being like, you see that guy?
Mm-hmm.
That one right there. Him. He was so excited to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean,
But honestly, like, he fits the level of, like, crazy fan really, really well.
And it works so well,
too.
It's
like, perfect.
There's just
really
the pure
good.
chaos in the background.
Yeah, and, like, it is an interesting dynamic, because the fans... It sounds dumb, but the level of fandom that Johnny has is kind of important to the story in a way. And so having this level of, like, he's not just, like, an opening act. He's not just like, oh, I got free tickets for the kids this weekend. Like, people are going specifically to see him.
He has, like, Beatle level of fame.
Yeah, like, people are out of their mind for him. Like, WWE wrestling in the 80s level fandom. And that really does help add to the believability of Johnny. Even though, like, when you step back and you're now talking about it after you've already seen it, you're like, I have a lot of questions on why Johnny's famous.
Yeah. To be fair, though, like, I mean, if I was an extra...
Oh, I would be the exact same.
I would do the exact same thing, too, which...
I would have been hired looking normal, and I would have come into shoot day looking like a crazy person.
Yeah, what was it? I was talking with one of the guys who's driving me for Uber, and he meant, like, it's one of those kind of things where it's, like, pointing yourself out, but, like, he had a cooler story because, like, he mentioned that, I think it was, like, his great-grandma was there on D-Day, and, like, they were watching a documentary, and she's like, oh, yeah, there I am. She was, like, with the Red Cross that came in. Yeah,
that's dope.
Yeah, she was actually in the documentary kind of thing.
Okay, being in a movie, cool. Being in a documentary on accident, that's amazing.
Yeah, on a big historical event, too. Not, like, just like, oh, I went to a Beatles concert. There I am.
Yeah, or, like, oh, I'm in this weird documentary about people who are really into polished stones. Like, you're in a big documentary on accident years later.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Exactly. And so, speaking of Johnny's dopeness, we cut back to the bus that has so many Hot Wheels flames.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this bus scene, especially after hearing Cage's ideas for Johnny, this bus makes so much sense. Okay. The details in the background to me just really, like, click.
Not for him. Like, no. the details are nice and it's leading up to stuff, but I think it's great. It's great because it does, like, later on, it doesn't feel like he has any decision making in this. Like, this is some corporate guy who's like, your bus is going to have flames, so that way when we have on the bus interviews,
yes,
they're there.
Exactly. So, like, the outside, so it's like, whoa, Johnny, yeah, metal, amazing. And then on the inside, it's pretty bro. I mean, it's a big bus where a bunch of guys are playing poker, but it's not...
His buddy's playing a Johnny Blaze video game.
Yeah, but it's not... It's weirdly personalized. Like, one of my favorite hobbies is to look to see what rich people do with their money, because if only... And the amount of personalization that most people who we can assume are at Johnny's level of fandom, or famedom, they have very personalized vehicles because they live in them.
Yeah.
Johnny's is pretty much off the lot.
Yeah.
They've decorated the outside. The inside's pretty much how you would expect it. I mean, it's nice, but it's not personal. Like, he's got some photos on the wall, but clearly his manager put them there.
Yeah.
And he is spending all of his efforts trying to unwind in the most, like, grandma way possible, while all of his, like all of his coworkers are like, dude, you gotta play this video game, you wanna come play poker, and he's over here drinking gummy jellies.
Jelly beans.
Two colors specifically. It's not even like the mixed bag. He has two colors this man likes. He puts them in a martini glass and is reading a book, which we can only assume is either proper literature or a joke book.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, he almost kind of doesn't take his life seriously.
No, and it's also very much like Johnny is an act.
Yeah.
And he does not actually live that act.
No, not at all.
No.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you, like you said, rich people, like how you expect them to live their lives, and it's like,
And
well, I do couponing on Sundays. I make sure that I get my deal on my bread.
Yeah, Johnny is that celebrity as opposed to, like, if you've ever seen pictures of, like, Dolly Parton's bus, it's exactly what you think it is, because Dolly Parton's not a caricature. She is Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
Johnny is a caricature. Johnny Blaze is a caricature, and Johnny, the normal Johnny, would really like to just be left alone to his sad knitting.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. He does seem like a dude who would go home and knit.
Yeah, he seems very much like a guy who's like, what are you doing tonight? He's like, I have just bought a 9,000 piece puzzle and I'm so excited for it.
Yeah. Well, okay, so there are some things to this too, because like I do like that it's establishing that he is not one of the boys. He's kind of estranged from his crew, besides the one guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the one crew member who's probably been around the longest.
Yeah. And I do like that he explains that he doesn't drink beer because it causes nightmares, which means he probably drank at one point.
Yes, and like, he doesn't smoke. He eats gummy jellies or jelly beans. And honestly, that's like a common thing that you see, especially for movie tropes, of like people who either are giving up smoking or trying to replace smoking.
Yeah.
Is like sunflower seeds, like little snacks to keep you busy.
Yeah, yeah.
And sweets. And so, like, he's, and this was all Nic Cage's idea, was like, oh no, this guy would try and, like, make his life as pleasant as possible.
Well.
But in, like, childish ways.
Yeah.
Like, distracting ways.
I get that, but I still don't like it. I
can see why.
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of the jelly bean bit, just, unfortunately, because it was Cage's request, like, I feel like what his idea of making Ghost Rider real, like, I understand drinking would invite the demons in.
Sure.
But I think the jelly beans is just a little bit too much. And I think, honestly, like, to make it, like, it's just that level of, like, comedic that's over the top. Because the director did originally envision him to be a heavy drinking, smoking, stereotypical Ghost Rider.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would have been too far.
I don't think 2007 would have been ready for that kind of superhero movie.
No, I do think that the jelly beans, like, to me, they do make sense, but I'm pulling from a lot of places. Yeah. I think what it would have fit better and would have tied back into the old Western tropes, and especially the Texas tropes, would have been sunflower seeds.
Yeah.
To me, that would have fit a little bit better.
Something a little less comedic.
Yeah, because unfortunately, he doesn't even pick, like, distinguished jelly beans. He's got yellow and red fire colors, which, cute, but, like,
yeah.
Like, if he, like, picked at them, I could see that more, because then that leads into the whole idea of, like, well, he's a star who has a specific thing. I could see that, but he drinks them like they're in a martini glass. It toes the line between a celebrity, which is Nic Cage's world, and he's probably pulling from personal experience there, but it doesn't necessarily read to a general audience.
Yeah, no, it's just a weird, awkward scene.
It is, but I'm sure he probably pulled it from somewhere where he was like, well, I know this guy, he's super famous like this guy.
Yeah.
And he's really into eating Cabbage Patch things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, it's like the My Weird Addiction where the woman only eats, like, cheesy potatoes.
Or you hear about, like, the celebrity who's like, every dressing room I go in, I need to have a box of heart chocolates specifically for me, and it can only be the Cadbury cream egg kind.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like one of those sort of things where he pulled from, but, like, we're not privy to that world, so, like, I don't know.
It just made me think of, last podcast on the left when they did when they started doing, like, their, I think it was, like, one of their shows or something, when they moved over to Spotify, like, they did our video, and, like, they had a pickle platter.
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of those kind of things.
Or it feels like a person who accidentally requested, like, can you please change all my hotel room photos to Danny DeVito, and the hotel did it.
Yeah.
And now that's, like, your thing. It feels like that, but, like, it's never really explained.
Yeah.
So, like, it's just him eating very bright colored jelly beans.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. It's paired with Nic Cage a little off.
Yeah, it's a continuation of establishing before we can even really get into the action. There's a lot of establishing, and that's probably part of the reason why the movie's so, like, weirdly paced, is because there's so much almost uninteresting establishments.
It also, like, if you really wanted to dig, which I'm sure Nic Cage did, because that's the kind of man he is, it does kind of lend into this idea that, like, Johnny leans into more childish stuff. Like
monkey videos, documentaries.
He likes nature documentaries. He likes silly, what would have been YouTube at the time, videos. Mm-hmm. He likes watching old Disney, like, silly string style cartoons.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't really take a lot seriously. He jumps motorcycles for a living. And he doesn't even seem to really like it.
Yeah.
But he collects the ruined motorcycle afterwards, like... So
it's something that he's stuck with. It's his comfort.
It is his comfort, and unfortunately the jelly beans just seem weird.
Yeah, which they probably could have been better if there was, like, something with, like... If they had done something in the prologue, not necessarily the prologue,
like if his dad had been really into
or if, like, his dad had been trying to quit smoking and was eating jelly beans or something. Like,
then I could have been like, yes.
Just a little something to connect it other than, like, randomly, he drinks jelly beans.
And only 2 flavors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But there is actually kind of a nice touch in this, and it is a nod back when he looks in the window and there's the skull over his face.
It looks good. It really
it's
does.
a nice nod.
It is a nice nod. And honestly, a lot of the really good CGI flashes like that are the ones that if you're not really watching the movie, you're gonna miss.
Yeah, it's like in Supernatural when they... and spoilers.
I mean, it's been over for how long now?
I think only like a year.
Yeah, it's because they drug their feet.
Yeah.
That's their own fault.
Well, when they get the cult.
Oh, yes.
And, like, they first kill the demon and there's, like, that lightning flash and there's, like, the skull reveal.
It's very good.
Some cool shit.
Yes.
There's a lot of tie-ins to Supernatural with this, I feel.
Yeah, but that's, I think, partially because Supernatural, especially earlier parts of Supernatural, towed the gothic, like, Western vibes.
Yeah.
Which you can only rewrite those themes so many ways.
Exactly. Because from this, also, the bus drives by and we dolly into a field where fire begins to rain.
Whoops.
And
honestly, it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, no.
Like, it feels like the start to, like, a metal, like, music video.
Yeah, no, it is it kind of makes me think of, what's his name? The Russian Dubikinsky? The guy who painted, like, the hellscapes and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, like, one of his paintings a little bit.
Yeah,
but
a little bit.
I kind of hate this scene because a demon appears.
Okay, I agree.
And he bites into the camera.
Yeah, I fully agree. The demon biting was not necessary. I do like the introduction of the demon.
Yeah.
Mostly because, like, we learn in a little bit, like, this is another big name demon. It's not just, like, a demon. Yeah. But I don't care for the whole, like, jump scare bit.
No, it's stupid. It is. It's kind of it's the opposite of The Host, where, like, Bong Joon-ho mentioned the only reason he kept that one jump scare in is because he defied, like, all normal rules up until then. This movie hasn't really even established, like, a horror moment to it. Like, this is the establishing horror shots.
This is the entirety of the horror.
Yeah.
But
kind of.
But in this movie's defense, that was, like, an expected shot for 2007.
Yeah.
For, like, a dark, spooky, like, every single movie had something jump at the screen, even if it wasn't a horror movie.
Yeah.
So, like, was I surprised? No. Was I disappointed? A little bit.
Yeah, because honestly, what would have been a better shot was if they had just kind of, like, dollied in on him or, like, zoomed in on him or did some kind of, like, cool shot of, like, transitioning over or and around him and showing him walking up to the bar in the middle of nowhere.
That would have been much better.
Exactly.
Yeah, because the bar in the middle of nowhere does kind of flash into existence.
Because after he bites at the camera, it cuts right to him.
Yeah, and like...
Or no, it doesn't even cut to him. It cuts to an establishing shot of the bar and right to an Hell's Angel dude just getting a beer.
And this is part of this was the start of me questioning the Texanness of the landscape. Mm-hmm. Because the bar in the middle of nowhere, classic Western Gothic style trope. Love it. No problems. The landscape around it, like, we don't get a highway establishing shot. Yeah. It's just in a desert.
Yeah, well, and actually, no, because you keep bringing up the Gothic theme, and, like, there is, like, this weird little tie-in of, like, Dracula and, like, Frankenstein of, like, the far off, or the far-flung kind of, like, side of the road, but it's always side of the road kind of establishments.
And the side of the road thing, which sounds dumb, but is incredibly, like, pinnacle to making a Texas Western feel like a Texas Western.
Yeah.
This bar is the first, like, hint for me that, like, we are no longer in Texas. I don't know where we are. I don't care where we are. But this is not Texas
It's
anymore.
some weird West, like...
We are just now in the West.
It's like, it makes me think kind of like Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is Courage the Cowardly Dog's bar, from whatever town Courage lives in. Which...
Nowhere!
Yeah, which could be in America. No problems with that. But we spend a lot of time, and the director spent a lot of time trying to, like, portray Texas. And we got there at the beginning. We get there a little bit in the middle, but we lose it right here.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like, from this moment, the demon kills, the bouncer who is wearing a 666 patch and Texas
also,
Killer patch.
And also mentions that Angel's only in there, which, like, cute nod to the whole Hell's Angels biker gang business. Like,
yeah.
Cute. And also, like, Angel's demons. It's a whole play. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, it feels like it's become kind of like the dad rock.
Oh, it's so dad rock. But, like, I don't care. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. I do like how this demon sucks people's, like, essence out or, like, poisons them.
Poisons, yeah, because we find later on it's sulfur poisoning.
Yeah, but also, like, definitely stealing stuff. Like, it's a whole bit... I do like it. I think visually it works really well for the most part. Yeah,
well, there are a couple things, because one of the set designer was, like, really excited for this, because you got to redefine the West, because the biker bar, like, it's a
stage.
Like,
it's not a real place, so they got to build it from the ground
up. It has
up.
the old saloon feel. There's a hitching post, but they've got bikes, so don't really need it, but it's still there.
And it's like, it's not even one of those kind of bars that, like, maybe someone else is in. Like, this shack is only for this biker gang. It's
that scene in the classic westerns of, like, this is the Billy the Kid gang, only we drink here, and then, like...
They've got, like, the one guy hostage to pour them drinks.
And the sheriff, like, kicks the dude through the door kind of thing.
It's very much that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but from the outside.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, like, nods to, like, the western in this that actually do quite well. It just doesn't... As a whole, it's at odds with the movie.
It's an odd combo.
Yeah. Because from this bar, this quick flash of the bar, pretty much, I mean, it's like maybe 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, it's short, despite how much effort they put into this bar.
Yeah. Because from here, we cut to Johnny's place in a not-so-friendly area of town.
I do like Johnny's place.
It has Western motifs all over the place, too.
It also has a nice little Gothic and, like, church-esque vibe, which is what adds to a Gothic Western to me, is, like, the elements of, like, almost Catholic evangelicalism.
Yeah.
So, like, he's got pretty stained glass in the back that comes up to a nice little arch. It's got really tall ceilings. It's got an open floor plan for no goddamn reason. Yeah,
it's a little bit pious, kind of. Or, like, we like millionaires, we could expect him to be living high and faluting. Like, I mean, let's be honest, this is a very expensive flat, but it's not as expensive like the penthouse.
In 2007, this would have been like mediocre. Nowadays, this would have been a very expensive penthouse.
Before the hipsters,
this would have been like, where's your bedroom? Oh, just in the corner?
Yeah.
Like, this was before that was cool.
Yeah. It is also of note that this was shot in Melbourne, specifically because... Not only because it wasn't like an excuse of like, oh, I always wanted to go to Australia. They chose Melbourne because apparently it's got a like wide variety of like downtown. Like downtown feels like a business district. Where they shot it at, it feels like old timey, like Chicago, Boston, port towns.
And then you've also got the western feel of the outback, not too far away. Like it is a very convenient place to film.
Actually, I wonder if there are Outback restaurants in Australia.
There's not. I know this because I had an exchange student who lived with us for a while, and she was very excited to go and was very disappointed with the menu.
I only know one Australian. I'm avoiding calling him the Tropical Irish because that's how I was introduced to him. Was asking him. He did not. I told him that, and he's like, you're not wrong, kind of thing. It's like,
no. She informed me that bloomin' onions are not a thing where she's from.
I know they're not. I do need to get Vegemite at some point. I'm down to try that.
It's very much like Marmite.
I've never had Marmite either.
It's okay. Don't worry too much about it. Put it low on your list.
At some point.
Yeah, when you're there.
Yeah. And so, as he returns home, he is listening to the Carpenters and watching monkey videos, as we mentioned.
And the monkey video was a real, like, YouTube-style at-home video that Nic Cage and the director both thought was funny, so they bought the rights to it.
Yeah, which
like, that's a nice, cute touch.
Well, because on top of that, like, it did go to a good cause. Like, the guy runs, like, a chimp rescue facility, and so, like, he makes the videos to, like, raise money for it and stuff. And...
Yeah, like, it's one of those, like, nice little, like, under-the-rug touches that, like, once you find out about it, you're like, this is the bit of knowledge I'm going to tell everyone who watches this movie.
It's wholesome. It makes you feel good. But in the movie itself, it just feels kind of weird.
I think I know why it feels really weird now.
Yeah.
Is because we have reached a level where funny videos are at a really high quality and production level and so readily available that, like, the whole at-home, America's Funniest Home Videos, that wasn't, it hasn't retranslated super well. It feels dated already. It's still, I mean, the show's still going, so, like...
Well, it also feels, like, reminiscent for, like, us of the early days of YouTube, as you mentioned.
Very much. And I think part of the thing that, like, feels... It really adds to the level of, like, non-realism is instead of going to another clip, like the TV shows would have...
It just continues. He keeps turning it off and on kind of thing.
And when he turns it back on, it moves over to the Skeleton Dance cartoon from, like, the old Disney one, which we all now know and love for spooky, scary skeletons. But back then, a little less known. Like, because, again, YouTube wasn't, like, the giant it is now.
Yeah, and Disney was very closed about, like, releasing anything besides their collector sets.
And this would have been, like, an older thing. Like, no one was watching... Yeah, no one was watching the old cartoons. Like, they weren't really on TV.
Yeah.
So, like, that's, I think, what breaks the reality for a lot of people, is, like, that doesn't switch to, like, a host being like, and our next video is a child farting.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
It doesn't feel like cable television.
No, which is weird to say, because, like, nowadays, that's, like, this is realistic. Like, you just click on the next video and watch it. But, like, back then, it's wrong.
It feels like something you'd find on, like, public access back in the day.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very much.
Yeah. But, so, for me, also, like, I like Nic Cage. I've come to appreciate him as an artiste.
Yes, as we know.
That he went, like, he did, like, I like that he does bring elements to the movie that the director wouldn't think of, but I just feel he was, I'm gonna be very punny here. He was, uncaged on this.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, where he didn't go full Vampire's Kiss.
No.
But he was just, like, he added elements that don't feel like they fit kind of thing. And
I think it's a bit of a two-way street, because there's definitely elements where, like, I think the director should have asked him to pull back a little bit on, or just told him, no, like, we're not doing the jelly bean thing.
Exactly.
But at the same time, like, clearly Cage had thought through this very detailedness.
Yes.
And so, like, it would have been nice to have had, in the background, some, like, posters or a magazine or something with some exposition on why.
Yeah. But the one thing I will say that is most believable about this part is the Carpenters.
Oh, very much.
Very
much.
I learned from the commentary. Apparently they are really hard to get licensed because they're tired of being, like, joked and parodied and used in, like comedic scenes.
I totally understand that. But, like, they fit perfectly with this. And honestly, like, they don't feel too jokey just because, like, Nic Cage took that spotlight for us, so they just feel like good background music.
But I also appreciate, because, like, Cage also put his input in. He's like, he wrote, like, one of the Carpenters. He's like, hey, this is why we want it. Like, we're not going to use it as a joke. This is why I love this and why this needs to be part of the movie. And I agree, they are a fitting part of the movie because, like, as someone who, like, listens to death metal a lot, like,
yes,
some people are surprised I listen to, like, calming video game soundtracks and stuff.
Yes. Yeah, like, this is very much a man who, while living his life on the edge, spends a lot of it listening to sweet, funny folk.
Yeah. The director also mentioned this was his dream bachelor pad, so...
It's a lot of people's dream bachelor pad.
Yeah.
This was everyone in 2007's dream bachelor pad, without the dangerous neighborhood. Take that part away. To have an elevator to your apartment...
I'll take the bachelor pad from Jumper.
That's a good one, too.
Yeah.
That's a good one, too. There was a weird fascination with having elevators that went straight into your apartment back in the day. It's still a little bit of a thing, but, like, people now realize, like, that's weird, because people can just get on your elevator.
Well, they actually mentioned that because he is living on the edge, because, like, you still haven't secured this. You have expensive bikes, man.
And, like, his elevator, like, it's implied that, like, the people above or below him, like, can just see and, like, walk into his apartment if they use the elevator.
Yeah. It's weird.
He clearly doesn't care.
Yeah. Doesn't give a shit.
He doesn't give a shit what happens.
Yeah, I mean, he's already crashed, as far as we know, many times.
At least, like, 5, because that's how many bikes I could remember. There's probably more.
Probably. I didn't count the bikes.
There's a lot of bikes.
Yeah.
There's too many.
Yeah. And so, from here, we cut back to the bar where everyone is dead besides the bartender. Oh, poor sweet thing.
But don't worry, she dies soon.
Yeah, because the demon from before kills her, and
I mean, it's a nice, like, continuing exposition on, like, the demon part, but, like, I got it the first time.
Yeah, trying to bring horror into it that just doesn't, like, fit as well.
No, and, like, this was pre, like, you couldn't get away in a movie with, like, proper scary visuals as opposed to, like, a jump scare for this type of movie. Like,
yeah.
It hadn't really been, like, broken ground yet.
Oh, there you are.
Like, that sort of movie automatically made it, like, too spooky.
Yeah.
And so, like, this movie would have benefited from these people's deaths being, like, properly gruesome as opposed to just, like, a cool visual effect.
Yeah, it wasn't, Blade 3 where Ryan Reynolds gets his head knocked to the side.
Yeah. And, like, granted, they're trying to toe a line. They're trying to, like, make this a superhero-esque anti-villain movie. Mm-hmm. So, like, we don't want to raise the ratings too high.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, why this fails is, like, the horror that it should have been.
Yeah.
Is because, like, we can't really do the jump scares, which is how you got around being, like, not actually scary, but, like, ooh, jump scares. Mm-hmm. That's how you did it back then. You couldn't really up the visual ante.
Yeah, especially with a large studio movie. There wasn't, like, an independent movie who's like, well, we're going to do it this way because that seems cool.
Yeah. So, like, they did what they could. I would love to see someone, like, remake this movie and, like, really go in heavy on the graphics. Because this movie is perfect for it.
Yeah.
Same thing with, like, the old Crow movie or, like all of these old Marvel movies, really. But I get it.
Yeah.
I don't love it. But it does add to the cheesy level, which is a different thing I like. So, like, I like it, just not in, like, oh, this is a good movie way.
Yeah.
I like it because now it's a bad movie.
Yeah, exactly. It's cheesy horror flick.
It's cheesy horror flick.
Because after everyone's dead, just magically some elementals assemble. The Hidden, I think they're called.
They are called the Hidden. I have a love-hate relationship with them because obviously we're missing one. Mm-hmm. Which implies that that element is now Johnny, but it's not, but it is. Like, I like their character design so much. I think the concept's cool.
It would have been better if the first guy we met had fire powers instead of sulfur.
Or if the, like, later on, he, like, bitched to his dad that he took the fire spirit element. Mm. And, like, is using it for his own purpose. Like, like, I would have gotten, like, satisfaction with these characters that way. That would be fine.
Well, I also think because it was a bit of a tie into the comic. From the bit of research I did, this character whose name is Blackheart.
Yes.
He is an amalgamation of, like, just pure evil created from his dad.
Yeah.
Again, I apologize. I did very basic research and didn't write down notes for that.
But honestly, for this movie, you don't really need to have any comic book knowledge.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It's that weird little bit of trivia that would have been nice.
Yeah, it would have, and, like, it's also one of those things, like, if this movie had taken off, which I think they kind of were hoping it would have continued.
I'll get into that at the end.
Yeah, it would have, like, benefited a little bit for that background knowledge, because they did reinvent the bad guys a little bit for this, specifically so that way they would have fresh stories to work with, which is smart, because that's something that we ran into problems with, like, with Spider-Man. Everyone already knew the bad guys. Same thing with Batman. We already know the bad guys. We don't care anymore.
And that kind of, that is another thing that kind of, like, kills this movie a little bit because they had to create some new stuff.
Yeah.
Because they've assembled to discuss the plan of getting the San Venganza contract from the Prologue and take over the world.
Well, one guy's eye slips down his face.
Yes.
I love it.
Nice effect. That is still a solid
effect.
Good.
It's so good.
Because Johnson mentioned he did want to play around with the idea of the fallen angel imagery. And because they had to hide from God for so long, they got lost and eventually began to take on the elements they were hiding in.
And once you know that, you're like, oh, yes, of course. But that's not explained anywhere outside of the director commentary. Exactly.
It's these weird little bits that are, like, kind of cool, but, like, aren't explained in the least, and it's frustrating.
And I would have liked some exposition similar to how, like, Van Helsing did, where, like, even if it's later on, I get a little bit of insight on, like, what the weirdness is happening.
Yeah, or if,
because then you're like, oh, well, why isn't there a second one? Why isn't there a third one?
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, there's just nothing.
There's nothing.
They exist. It's not like Lord of the Rings where, like, they have a quick mention of, like, oh, but we were there on that day, and it's like...
Or like, oh, they were made from fallen elves. Yeah, they don't really say.
Yeah, it's just nice. Like, oh, these elementals appear.
And you're like, oh, so the elements are bad?
Yeah.
Why are the elements bad? I feel like the elements shouldn't be bad.
Yeah. What I will say, though, the costuming in this movie.
So good.
The demons all have this, like, westernish look to them. The long trench coat without, like, the wide brim hat kind of thing.
It's very cowboy-esque.
And the costume designer also tried to get textures that match the elements, not necessarily of the element.
Yes.
Because the water dude's jacket is made of stingray.
Yes.
The dirt guy's is made of parrotfish.
Yep.
And the wind guy's is made of shark skin. So he's got, like, that really worn, like, sand sharp, rocky look.
And, like, it's a little disappointing how little time you get to, like, take in their character designs, because all the way down to, like, hair and makeup, they're not blatant like you see with some versions of elemental characters.
Yeah,
they are a little bit more so. Granted, the wet guy's wet.
Yeah.
But, like, for the most part, it's not like, oh, that guy's just made of dirt.
Yeah, it's not the wet ghost girl trope in Japanese cinema.
Exactly. And, like, there was a lot of detail put into them. We don't really look at them a whole lot.
No.
Like, we see them, but, like, mostly in them doing elementally things.
They are my most frustrated character in this movie, and I will get to that later on, and there's reasons why they're frustrating. Because the meeting is interrupted by Mephistopheles, and we learn that Blackheart is his son.
Oh,
and he is jealous of the Ghost Rider. Again,
I would love some backstory.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why is he jealous of Ghost Rider?
This is the perfect point where we could have, like, instead of being jealous of Ghost Rider, bitched about how he's, like, stole the fire spirit from him, and, like, that's why he's mad at his dad. Yeah. Like, this would have been the perfect spot for that.
It would have been great, because, like, that would potentially explain why he only has the soul for power, because his Hellfire's gone.
Yeah, this would have been...
He only has the smoke left.
Yeah, this would have been a great spot for some, like, backwards, stupid mythology bullshit to be put in. But instead we get, I'm angry at my dad because I think I would be a better dad. It's... Yeah. Like, they don't really even explain, like, what his dad took from him other than, like, being like, son, you come home at midnight. That's curfew.
Yeah, I mean, there is some good to this scene, too. Like, I mean, it does establish that really the movie's about daddy issues.
It is very much about daddy issues. And, like, I like seeing the character contrast between father and son. Like, they do look like they go together nicely, character development-wise, but, like, it's just okay.
Yeah, because, I mean, I'm trying to find more to this movie too.
Yeah.
This is me also pulling at strings, because, like,
this movie has a lot of potential, which is the frustrating part.
Exactly. It's kind of my frustrations with, like, how Inception is kind of a little bit.
Yeah, I understand.
Which I'm still fuming on, but we it's good at establishing this father-son dynamic, because Blaze, even though his deal was out of selfishness, he also did it because he did care about his dad. There is that thing, whereas Blackheart just hates his dad. Yeah, there's no reason why he hates his dad other than, like, oh, I should be king of the land. I should be king of these naked apes.
Yeah. Again, a little bit more character depth on literally anyone other than Ghost Rider would be great.
Yeah, exactly. And from here, like, we get that, I hate you. It's like...
I hate you, you're not my real dad.
It makes me think of a less dynamic Obi-Wan.
Yes. Oh my god. Moment. It really does. It really does. Oh no.
You are the chosen one! I hate you!
I hate you. Yeah. Yeah, no, it very much, like, reads like spoiled brat with superpowers, but...
I am so excited for when we do eventually get to Star Wars.
We were going to have to get there eventually.
Eventually.
We'll jump right into that Christmas special with Chewbacca.
Oh, actually, that would be a really good one to do. Ooh.
Oh, that one's bad.
I already hate you for Christmas right now.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome.
But anywho, from here, that part of the reason, like, it doesn't make any sense, because we just cut right back to...
Oh yeah, no, like, this whole conversation's useless.
Crowds getting excited in a very stereotypical way. You got the low-cut shirt, hot girls.
Oh, there's a lot of, like, Daisy Dukes, make them girls go whoop, whoop, like, sort of thing.
I'm not complaining. It's
no,
just...
no one's complaining, but, like...
Well, actually, no, people, I think it was they said, like, the Australian critics, or a lot of, like, people complained that there was too much cleavage in this movie.
Oh, those honeys haven't been to a Texas fair.
No, not at all.
No, that was conservative shirt.
Yeah, well...
They've got at least a couple buttons buttoned. They're good.
Couple. It's not to, like, the level of anime couple buttons where, like...
There's, like, one button hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, it's gonna fling and knock out a dude. Yeah.
No, there's none of that.
Yeah, because in the meantime, Johnny is getting hyped to who else but the Carpenters.
The Carpenters. I do like how his hype up moment is in a really nice room, and his idea of hyping himself up is just like looking at himself in the mirror and be like, all right, I know you hate your life and your job, but you gotta get out there, son.
Oh yeah. No,
it's not even like him being like, all right, we gotta get pumped. It's just like, come on, one more day.
Yeah, he's pumping as, like, listening to Carpenters and drinking coffee straight from the pot.
Straight from the pot. This poor man really needs to, like, go talk to someone about his life problems, but he hasn't. He instead is asking his assistant to bring him a fake walking cane and a cowboy hat.
I mean...
Hey, whatever makes you feel better, Johnny.
Performance is theatrics.
He does mention later on, like, his character mentions that, like, he doesn't really like the outfit, but his audience likes it, so he keeps wearing it.
It's like Guy Fieri.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so from this, as he's about to go on, Roxy appears back in his life.
I love how she just, like, strolls out of... Like, anyone could be walking out of that arch. Fans could be swarming this man, but no. Everyone stops for Roxy.
It's a very comic book moment.
It's so comic book. And honestly, knowing that this is supposed to be comic book movie does help a lot, because that makes this scene good as opposed to dumb.
Yeah, because the interview that follows is a very bad reunion catch-up.
He spends the whole time trying to ask her how she is and talking to her, and she's trying to conduct an interview.
She's just a young gung-ho... Fuck you, Chris. I hate you so much. She's a young go-ho... That's gonna play out by Christmas.
Yes. Continue.
Anywho, she is a young gung-ho reporter who apparently is not getting a lot of breaks, and I feel like her trying to interview Blaze is very much her trying to get on the books of, like, I got the exclusive interview, because it's mentioned that Blaze doesn't do interviews.
Yeah, it does, but at the same time, like, it's really awkward because this is, according to this universe, Blaze is a huge celebrity. And, like, even if she hadn't gotten the Blaze specific interview, was still sent to go cover this story.
Yeah.
So, like, it's hard to tell if, like, this was her big break, and, like, she wormed her way to get this, or if, like, she's doing okay, and she's just not, like, the top reporter that she thinks she should be.
I think it's her still trying to get her foot in.
Okay.
Well, yes and no. I think maybe she's on like kind of a downward arc, because Blaze mentions that, like, oh, they said you got married, and he's like, it didn't fall through. She's on some level where she's being reported, like, to the public.
Yeah, she's definitely popular of some kind.
But we don't ever get it. Again, we get, like, little snippets, but no real, like,
substance.
Exactly.
It would have been nice if, like, he had been following her career or something.
Yeah.
Like, with some snippets in the background or something.
Yeah.
But, movie's only so long.
Yeah. And after the bad interview, Blaze decides that this is his sign that he's in charge for some stupid ass reason.
Him pretending to see her in the audience means that he can jump helicopters now.
Yeah.
And, like, I get it. It's, like, the cheesy love, like, conquers all sort of bullshit. And, like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, this is such a, like, movie nonsense scene of him jumping the helicopters.
It's like we just have to bring her back in for something.
Oh, yeah. And, like, it's not even an important scene.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't care.
No, but I do like her coming back.
I do, too. I appreciate that, like, she continues to dress like a comic book reporter as opposed to a real person reporter. Because, like, her shirt is so low buttoned. It's mostly titty.
Yeah.
Which, in a real world setting, would have been like, oh my god, what news are you working for? But in reporter comic book world, like, that's how they draw comic book ladies, is with, like, their shirts mostly on buttons and their titties hanging out.
I have seen some documentaries.
I mean, we're not talking about that one weather lady who dresses in spandex to report the weather.
The Spanish one.
Yeah, the Spanish lady.
Oh,
we're not talking about her.
I'm thinking of other documentary films.
Yes. Cultured films.
Cultured. I like that term, cultured films.
Cultured films, yeah. No, and, like, it's one of those things, a lot of people knew this was a comic book film, but, like, didn't go into it with a comic book mind.
Yeah.
And so, like, her dress went over a lot of people's heads, and so instead of reading as comic book, like,
reporter
lady, it read as, like, wow, this is Fast and the Furious dude bro style.
I'll get to those movies at some point.
I know, but, like, 90s bro was part of the common vernacular.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of wife beaters, a lot of unkept white dirty wife beaters was, like, that was your shirt.
Yeah.
And so, like, unfortunately, it read too close to that instead of comic book, which...
But, well, and kind of at the same time...
It both works and doesn't. It's a hard line.
Yeah, because Mendez did also mention, I feel it would have had more of a comic booky impact, specifically at the time if she had been blonde and blue-eyed. For sure. Because Mendez does... Or not Mendez. Johnson does mention he chose Mendez because she wasn't the stereotypical... blonde hair, blue-eyed, as well as, like, her spirit as an actress.
And it's one of those things where, like, could we have solved this by adding some visual effect across the movie where, kind of like Tank Girl or Sin City, we're clearly comic book inspired, or are we expecting the audience to bring that themselves?
Yeah, Tank Girl is still in my backlog, so
you'll love it.
I'm excited for it.
You will love that movie.
Yeah, but it is on to the jump because Johnny has told his friend he has taken out the
cars as requested.
But he brought in helicopters
Which is a cute touch because his dad had thought about jumping helicopters.
Jumping a helicopter.
One single helicopter. But I do like the progression speed that this is showing because like this is fairly realistic to real life. How we went from jumping like a car. Wow, amazing. Jumping a football field. Wow, amazing. Jumping the Grand Canyon. Wow, amazing. Like that's... seems right.
It's not Chris Angel. I will be suspended from hooks above the Grand Canyon.
But at the same time, like, this man feels like Chris Angel. Without the edge.
Yeah, yes.
This is the flame-encrusted Chris Angel of the stunt world.
This is a dad motorcycle rock Chris Angel.
Yeah, if Chris Angel is like dad emo, this man is dad punk rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of. Hard rock.
Hard rock.
Hard rock.
Or classic rock.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, with the Roxy boost, he has the power to land the jump. He doesn't crash, but he decides to throw a helmet at a kid in the crowd's face.
And the director mentions very bluntly, he's like, yeah, the kid was supposed to catch it. And he just like let it hit him in the face and we were all worried. This kid almost lost a tooth.
Oh, it's such a great moment.
But like it's perfect because like that's how children catch things, and so like it's perfect because this kid just gets nailed in the face with the helmet. It's great.
It's like those videos of like cats attacking children.
Oh yeah, this is right up there.
Oh yeah. But some of you may be asking, this was filmed in Australia, wasn't it?
It was, in fact. Where would they get a football field in Australia?
They had to cheat on an Australian football field because those fields are wider than an American football field.
And honestly, like, You don't notice. It looks fine.
No,
it looks great.
I mean, if you were nerdy enough in sports.
I'm sure a hardcore football fan could analyze the scene, but the helicopters distract nicely.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a nice filler.
Oh, yeah. It definitely eats up a lot of that.
It is the swimsuit episode of an anime arc.
It is the beach episode.
Yeah, exactly. And so, from this great success, Blaze is off to catch the girl and stop fucking traffic.
Yeah, okay. I like how you could tell that both Cage and the stunt drivers for the motorcycles were having a great time showing off the motorcycle stunts because, this is very, like, basic stuntman showing off, like, teenager showing off to his girl, doing, like, wheelies, doing backwards wheelies, like, standing on the bike, like, all that sort of nonsense.
She's reinvigorated his spirit.
Yes. And the director spends the whole time being like, this made me so nervous, they're doing it without a helmet.
Yeah.
Which, like, granted, yes, totally agree. Very nerve-wracking. But the stuntmen seem to be having the time of their lives.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I mean, that's the thing is, like, they weren't really sure what to do. They were just going to have him show up and just like, hey, what's up?
And talk to her, but the stunt guys were, like, pulling wheelies and stuff.
Well, it wasn't even that. Like, the stunt guys were showing off, and then Cage is like, I want to do that.
Yes. And so Cage also feeds into it, because Cage is like, that's totally what he would do.
Yeah, exactly.
Is he would show up doing wheelies and trying to impress her again.
Yeah.
And so the director's like, well, I gotta do it. But man, you guys better be careful.
Yeah. Well, and also, because, like, they mentioned, like, yeah, they're not going 75 miles an hour. They might be going 20 or 30,
yeah,
but, like it's still...
Like, that's fast enough to hurt you.
Yeah, or kill you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, no one, like, stunt-wise, I think we had a broken leg.
Yeah, one of the stunt guys got hurt badly.
Yeah.
Like, not even badly, just, like...
So, yeah, somebody broke some bones, but for stunt movies that, like, are risking, like, this movie, doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Not, like... Still with, like, no accidents. That's the goal. But, like, you know, one day with the raptor attack is better than no day. Like, better than 12 days.
Yeah. And so one thing about being able to shoot the scene, they got lucky because they were able to film on an unfinished highway. Yes,
which, very lucky because, again, incredibly dangerous.
But also, like, I actually like this part, but a lot of the humor feels awkward. Because Cage brought a lot of the humor to what would have been a serious script, and... Yes,
he brought a lot of the humor, but honestly, like, yes, the humor is incredibly awkward. But I like it, because, again... This character supposedly hasn't tried to bond with anyone in, like, what?
No.
10, 15 years? Maybe more? Maybe 20 years?
Well, and on top of that, I mean, it does show, like, how out of touch he is with Roxy as well, because, like, he's like, you still like Italian?
Yeah, you still like Italian like you used to? And, like, back then, like, the one Olive Garden.
Yeah.
Like, he went to the mom and shop spaghetti place with her that one time, like...
A high school date.
Yeah.
I've done that same date.
Every high school date, your options were Mexican or Italian.
Because it's cheap and filling.
Exactly.
Yeah. But, I mean, he does get the girl.
Yeah, like, I mean, it wins over, and luckily, Johnny is such a star that no one's upset that he just, like, completely took over the highway. Yeah. And everyone's now late for whatever they were doing.
And the cow's mooing to the kiss is stupid.
It is, but you know what? Again, there's elements that if it had, like, continued throughout the whole movie, I would have been like, oh, cheesy cute. Yeah. But, like, there's just chunks of it. Yeah. There's chunks of cheddar in this movie that just didn't melt.
Yeah, and my mind immediately went to Mandy, Cheddar Goblin.
Yeah.
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 But Blaze got the girl as the interstate lines up to meet him, which is one of the stupidest moments of the movie. Oh, it's the
stupidest thing, but honestly, like, again, if you go into this with the comic book mindset, you're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
He's the most famous man on the planet right now, according to the movie. So. Yeah.
So, we cut to the night where Johnny is late to dinner, and...
not just a little late, he is severely late to dinner.
To the point where she's nervous.
Like... She's had at least 2 glasses of wine at the restaurant, which means she has checked in, gotten seated, gotten asked how long he'll be. Would you like to order a glass? Yeah, I'll have one. Sips your way. Like, he is probably like a full hour late to this date.
Yeah, because he's at home trying to hype himself up.
Come on. Like, okay, I get it. I wish this scene, though, was him, like, on his way there.
Yeah.
But I get it, because, like, this would have been hard to film with him on his way there, so, like, I get it, but it's awkward.
Yeah, well, and also, I mean, there's a stupid part to it, and this is me nitpicking. Why is she checking her phone? There was no exchange of numbers.
No, there was no exchange of numbers, and, like, up until the phone, I can forgive the technology. Like, I can ignore the technology in this movie. But, again, 2007, we didn't realize how fast phones were going to move.
Yeah.
Like, phones had been fairly the same for quite a while.
Yeah, this is about the time the first iPhone is coming out.
And, like, that would have been, like, the future.
Yeah.
And, like, all phones in the future are going to look like the iPhone, which, I mean, they kind of do. But, like, we expected the Nokia and the BlackBerry to continue on their lives.
Yeah, this is, like, the era of the flip phone and the Razor.
Yeah, and, like, we legit thought that, like, that's how phones are going to be. Like, of course, like, no one expected the small screen in the pocket.
Yeah. Also, her dress in this scene.
Again, comic book titties.
She is very much there too. She wants something to happen that night.
Yes, and like I appreciate that. Like the actress talked in one of her interviews. She was like, "Yeah, I was a good little bit thinner before this, but they were showing me concept art of like the comic book character, and I was like, well, I can't be blonde, I can't be blue-eyed, but I can have big tits and big hips."
Yes.
And so she put on a little weight for this film, specifically so she would look more like a comic book character. And I think she does great. I think she looks very much like, yeah, she's a little bit extra seductive, but not a ton. She just looks like the main interest.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, before Johnny can even leave, he is called by a voice and he hears the revving of a motorcycle as, Roxy proceeds to get even drunker.
Oh, poor Roxy. Roxy's having a terrible day.
I do feel sorry for her.
I do too.
Because in the alley, there is the old motorcycle as Mephistopheles appears.
And this is... I know some people are conflicted with this scene. Mm-hmm. I like it.
I do like it to a point, too.
I like it, but I like it because, A, when I started this movie way back in the day, I already liked Cage for Crazy Cage.
Okay.
And now I like it because I know that Cage came into it fully understanding the dynamic of the character.
Yeah.
And so, like, now I really appreciate it. I can see how people are confused and upset by this scene.
Yeah, it's just a weird, like... It's just kind of like...
It's a weird transformation scene.
It's a weird transition from, like, I hate you, Dad, to, oh, he got the girl, to, oh, now he's screwed. Like, it's just a weird... back and forth that, I mean, we've seen movies that bounce back and forth. This one just does it in an odd manner that doesn't...
And, like, we were also at an awkward point in superhero transformations, too, especially Marvel. And granted, I think Cage did a good job trying to explain his choices for the crazy faces coming up, the laughing coming up, where he's like, well, Johnny doesn't want it, but the Ghost Rider does, like, making the distinction there.
Yeah, I'll get into that in just a minute, because, like, we have actually a little bit of time before that, too, because, yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit before this.
There is quite a bit. Because,
a side note, the bike is based off the classic bike ridden by Peter Fonda, who played Mephistopheles.
That guy.
But Peter Fonda was an Easy Rider, and they modified it so they can avoid copyright issues.
Yeah, and like it's a classic looking bike.
Yeah.
How can you go wrong?
And Cage actually suggested Fonda as Mephistopheles.
Perfect choice.
Yeah, and that's why he says, "Nice ride."
Yeah, it's a good little nod.
Nice little nod if you're a movie nerd or like just a bike nerd. Because once on the bike, and this is a real quick. Johnny is under the control of the bike, or the Ghost Rider.
Yes. It's no longer Johnny.
So, I have conflicting thoughts about this upcoming part, because as he's blazing through the streets...
just setting the city on fire.
Yeah, there are shots where it feels very comic booky, like the part where, like, it's just him and the bike's, like, revving up and down, and there's this fire behind him. That feels very Sin City-like.
Yeah.
But it's so unlike how in Sin City is, like, overall that aesthetic.
Yes, that's very consistent.
Ghost Rider is very much more realistic and grounded, and the shot just feels out of place.
Yeah, so I do think that Ghost Rider tried to be a more grounded superhero anti-villain sort of anti-hero,
yeah.
dark one. I do kind of wish that it had leaned in a little bit into an overall filter.
Yeah, it tried putting the grounding of Daredevil into a supernatural movie.
Yeah, and like we were coming up on that time period of where like this sort of thing could have been filmed and produced and grounded without much trouble.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't quite there yet.
No.
And so, yes, there are scenes like this one where even if you have forgotten that this is a comic book film, you're like, oh, that was kind of dope, but out of place.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it would have been nice, maybe not as heavy-handed as, like, Scott Pilgrim, but, like, a layer of comic book over the top of this film would have been nice to help remind the audience, like, by the way, you are still watching a comic. Don't forget.
Yeah, and I think we have a better grasp of either grounding or making it full-blown comic.
Yeah, and we were getting there. We were leading up to it, but again, this was an awkward phase for superhero films.
Exactly. And so from this, we cut to a train yard where the Hidden are trying to find the cemetery, or the cemetery with the contract, but we finally have a movie where someone moved the graves as well as the bodies.
Yes. Okay, I actually really, really like this. Because there is some truth to the whole, like, old graves don't move. It's a pain in the ass to move graves. Most jurisdictions don't want to, but it does happen.
Yeah.
And, like, the graves that they're looking for are, this is supposed to be Texas, so, like, we're anticipating big cities. Lots of new development.
Yep.
And
it's the West. It's
and it's been around forever, according to this lore.
Yep, and it's the trains, which obviously they haven't interacted with the human world in a long-ass time. And
I appreciate how they go ahead and say, oh yes, they've all been moved. They're now over there somewhere. And they don't go into so much detail that, like, if you were really invested in the logistics of moving graveyards, like some of us are for no good reason, that it would bother you. Yeah. It's just like, oh yeah, occasionally we have to move them. We put them over by a church over there.
Yeah. And I do feel sorry for, like, the worker, but it also establishes, like, they are going to kill anyone who is even remotely in their way. Anyone who sees them, basically.
Yeah, and it also, like, I think from the director's point of view, this was supposed to really solidify that they, like, the demons are not picking good versus evil. They're just killing. Yeah. Whereas Ghost Rider is supposed to be choosing only to harm those who have done wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, I mean, we'll talk about in a minute, but...
Yep, because finally, Ghost Rider arrives, and we get the transformation 45 minutes into an almost 2-hour movie.
This is almost the halfway point before we actually see the hero.
Yeah. I, for one, still think this transformation is pretty decent.
I do, too. I think we've come a long way, though.
Yes, exactly.
This is impressive from, like, if this had been on, like, Grimm the TV show, I would have been like, wow, this looks great. Yeah. If this had been a movie nowadays, I think we could have upped the bubbly aspect a little bit.
Yeah, like the skin actually popping instead of, like, just burning away kind of thing.
Because the director talks about what he wants. Like, he didn't want melting, like Indiana Jones. Totally agree. No problems there. Yeah. But he talks about, like, oh, I wanted the skin to be blistering away like third-degree burns.
But it doesn't.
It doesn't. And, like, I understand why. Again, we're towing around that censorship line. The Australians that, like, his main target audience was America and Australia. That was pretty obvious.
Well, actually, no, because Australia wasn't really that big of an audience because they don't really apparently he mentioned, like, most of Australia doesn't have, like, the comic book culture America and UK has.
No, they don't. But he still wanted to release it there. Yeah. Which means that we're towing this weird line.
Yeah, because, right, you're right, because he did mention that a lot of, like, the extras and side characters were Australians, young Australian actors who had to learn American accents for the movie.
Yeah, which, granted, they all did great, and you don't notice it.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know the movie was filmed in Australia until...
And once you see it, you can't unsee it. But it's one of those oddball moments where, like, again, we're not gruesome enough. We haven't touched body horror enough for it to be...
It's not... It toes the line of, like, how us really big horror fans get frustrated when we have that default of, oh, it's PG-13.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. And, like, I get why. But this is, for me, like, I see Cage's performance, and I get it, because I like Cage. Mm-hmm. I know where he was coming from with this, and, like, I had the background knowledge of knowing that Ghost Rider and Johnny are not the same person.
Yeah.
But that's not explained very well in this movie.
No, it's not at all, because like you mentioned, the director wanted it to feel pleasurable for Ghost Rider to, like, be the skeleton is free of the skin.
Yeah, like, he wanted Ghost Rider to be the one who wants to be out and free, kind of Hulk versus Banner sort of mindset, which I'm... No problems. I'm okay if that's the direction we want to go with this version of Ghost Rider. Not a problem. It's more accurate to the comic book. I'm okay with that. But we don't explain it. So, like, Cage's, like, maniacal laugh halfway through...
Yeah.
Like, doesn't read as anything other than, like, oh,
Cage
it's
being
Cage.
Cage, yeah.
Cage. Which, again, it's unfortunate.
And I think it ties into... The unfortunate thing about Ghost Rider is Ghost Rider very much has a one-track mind.
Yes.
And he doesn't have the depth, when, like, not saying that the Hulk has a lot of depth to him, but he has more character than Ghost Rider does.
And granted, like, we've had, 30 years to develop the Hulk character, and the first, 4 iterations he was kind of weak. Or bad, just straight up bad. The first 2 Hulks were bad.
I have not seen any of the Hulk movies.
You would like the 80s Hulk movie because he's like a WWE wrestler and he's purple.
Nice.
But, yeah, like the newer Hulk, I don't think he'd be your thing because he's pretty straightforward. It's a weak interpretation of Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, but
it's very mainstream now. But the transformation and the clarity between Hulk being a character and Banner being a character was very nicely done. Yeah. Because Banner just talks about the Hulk and, like, he's not me. Yeah. Hulk is Hulk.
Yeah, and that you're right. It isn't explained in this at all.
No, which I think if we had done that a little bit, and I think if we had leaned just a little bit, like, not even a lot, just a little bit more into the body horror, I think we would have hit that perfect spot. Yeah. Like, this movie's primed to be repicked up, sort of thing, but, like, we're not, we'll get into it.
Yeah, exactly. Because at this point, he's there, you go back.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's cool.
Yeah, it's very Terminator kind of thing.
It's very Terminator, and, like, I appreciate the distortions that they tried out on the demon voices and on Ghost Rider's voice, because some of it's kind of what you expect. Some of it is playing on some animal sounds in the background, which is fun. None of it's exactly a copy for something else. It's all just a little bit weird and funky, and none of them feel like the same. Yeah. Which is fine. I kind of like the experimentation.
Yeah, which, unfortunately, this part leads to my biggest gripe with the movie, for one of the bigger gripes.
Okay, what's yours?
Because, for starters, Dirt Dude is killed real quick. There's a reason behind that.
There's a reason.
Because the trailer for Spider-Man's Spider-Man 3 with Sandman.
Spider-Man 3.
Had just been released, and so they're like, the studio wanted to get rid of him altogether, and they're like, well, we already have him established, we have to reshoot a bunch of stuff. He's like, alright, we'll let you keep him, but he's gotta die first.
Which, I agree. It feels weird, but at the same time, it is unfortunate they are very similar character designs.
Yep, because here's where this ties into a lot of horror movies, is that the lackeys, they are very much the cannon fodder for what would be the stereotypical, like, Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers.
Yes, very much so.
And that's probably the biggest issue, is, like, the big baddies aren't really that big. And yeah, some of the kills are creative, but, like, they're kind of boring. Yeah. And they're so fast.
They are, and, like, part of what we've learned through all of this trial and error with superhero movies is that, like, having your hero fail, and fail multiple times in different ways, not just the same way, does really benefit your long-term storytelling.
Yeah.
We see that really well with, like, Iron Man and Spider-Man, I think, are the two best examples of that.
Yeah.
And Ghost Rider doesn't fail. Like, he gets beat up a little bit, but, like, he doesn't fail. He still kills, like, every single time we come to an interaction, we successfully beat at least one bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's no risk.
No, exactly. We don't feel a weakness in him.
No, which is odd because, like, I think if we had gone fully the other way, where, like, Superman, we just don't have the weakness, would have made more sense, but that's not how the comic book character is, and the director and Cage are both really hard into the comic books.
Yeah.
So it's an odd translation that didn't quite read for everyone.
Exactly. Because after Dirt Dude is killed, the rest of the group escapes, and the bike transforms into
it looks dope.
Hellsacker, and he is out to punish the evildoers. Which okay, there are parts I like about the bike. The front of it is very horse-like.
Yes, love that. Looks
and
good.
It is, the practical effect is made from after production Harley Davidson parts.
Yes, it is.
And they wanted it to be Geiger-esque, which for those who don't know, H.R. Giger is
Geiger is a different person.
Yeah. Giger is a Swiss artist who's most famously known for creating the style for the Xenomorph in Alien. But they also made the bike more stylish than the comic, because the comic, it's very much just a bike. Or if I remember right from what I was reading, if they had gone with the second Ghost Rider, it got very much Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle-esque because of Akira.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Which would have been, instead of a Harley, which is a very distinct look to a bike, and fits better into the themes of this movie. We've already established Hell's Angels, which are kind of notorious for riding Harleys. We would have been in weird sport bike territory, which 2007 sport bike wouldn't... Like, it would have been the wrong vibe.
Yeah.
And so I like what they did with it. I like how we've skelefied the bike as a whole. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest changes that they did was the bike from the comic doesn't have wheels. It's just fire. Yeah. I like the new wheel design. I have questions about the burning trail forever behind the bike. Yeah,
I've got questions about the fire down the line too.
Okay, I'm glad we have questions.
Yeah, there's. I mean, it's comic book logic. It's just like we said, we're looking too far into some of it.
Oh, for sure. For the most part, I think the bike is really cool. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, the bike is just full CGI. Like, there's not a lot of prop action for this bike, which I do think is part of the eventual problem of this movie. Yeah. Is a lot of this that was real looks CGI, and the stuff that was CGI people were hoping was real. Yeah. There is a real version of this bike, though, and they used it for the promotion, and it looks dope.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is a cool Giger-esque bike.
It is. Again, though, this was before big Marvel money, so, like, we had money. We didn't have Marvel money yet. Yeah, so, exactly. Like, that's why this movie looks weird.
Or now technically Disney money too.
We didn't have either.
Yeah. But after the transformation, we get a quick cut to the hotel that Roxy is still waiting, and
poor Roxy.
She decides to ask the waiter, "Is she ugly?" And he snubs her, which very nice shot, but
it is. Again, knowing that this is comic book logic, perfect sense, no problem. Yeah. Outside of comic book logic, you're like, what is this man thinks that this woman's not pretty? Yeah. Really? Your standards are higher than her?
Doesn't he say something of, like, not my type?
No, he says something like, no, not really.
Yeah, some stupid shit like that.
It's some, like, if he had said not my type, I think more people would have been like, okay, alright, fair, fine. But he's just, like, straight up like, no, you're not. You're just okay. What? What level of Hollywood is this man living in? No.
Apparently the one that will not try and seduce a drunk woman.
Fair. I will give him that. Yeah. Kudos on that gentleman level. But, like, if you go in knowing this is comic book knowledge, where, like, all teenagers are buff and, like, good looking, with no pimples, this makes perfect sense. Yeah. No problems.
Yeah. And so, back in the streets, Ghost Rider stops a perch snatcher, and we get a glimpse of his second power, kind of. Because that's right. The fight scene the fight scene with Dirt Dude established the chain whip because they hang him.
Chain lasso.
Yeah.
Whip lasso. It's a rope.
Yeah,
that's on fire.
They hung him with. I forgot about that bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you really try, it does all tie back really nicely into that whole Western Gothic vibe, which is what I like. It's just quick. It's quick and dirty, and so it's a little hard to catch, unfortunately. Yeah,
because, and that's the thing, is like, we don't get an explanation of this power until later on, and it's just like...
and it's bad. It's a bad explanation.
And the director said he meant to show that the guy was alive because of the eye wink, but it just makes me think
I watched this movie twice, and I couldn't catch the eye wink. So,
it's just like a death twitch.
It's like, And so, like, I agree with the director.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Ghost Rider doesn't kill.
Yeah.
He just inflicts eternal punishment.
Doesn't kill people. Doesn't kill them directly.
Doesn't kill people. Kills demons. But, like, I could have gone with a full blink.
Mm-hmm.
A full, proper blink would have been suffice.
Yeah. No, exactly. But I will say in this moment, now that we've had a little bit of time to actually, like, see Ghost Rider not in motion.
Yeah.
The skull animation is not very good, but the fire.
The
fire is the best aspect of this movie.
This fire looks so good, and not just on the skull, everywhere.
Yeah.
The fire looks phenomenal. I agree, though. Part of the reason I think it looks odd is because, this is going to sound weird, but Nic Cage's head is a tiny bit small.
Ghost Rider's head is a tiny bit small.
So they tried to model Ghost Rider off of Cage.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is Ghost Rider is wearing a Cage shirt, which thick.
Yeah.
And then a chunky leather jacket for riding. And they picked a proper, like, leather Harley-style jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Which adds a lot of shoulder. And Cage is not a bulky man. Granted,
no.
He toned up a lot for this movie. But he is still not Captain America's shoulders.
No.
Which, unfortunately, reflects in a very small skull on a very wide-shouldered body.
It's a bit weird, yeah.
And they tried to fill it out with the fire. I feel like we could have adjusted the proportions a little.
Just a little bit.
I know they're realistic. Don't care.
It's a comic book movie. It doesn't need to be realistic.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, Blaze collapses in a cemetery and Ghost Rider collapses in a cemetery and transforms back with all his gooey flesh coming back.
I do like the go back scene. I think that one reads better than the go to scene.
Exactly. And he is found by Caretaker.
I love Undertaker.
Fun fact, this was shot in Melbourne Cemetery, which apparently is like super ancient and or ancient.
Well, and it's got some really cool tombstones, so like if you're into tombstones, that one's a good one.
Oh yeah, because they're old worldy too.
Yeah, they've got the nice big tall ones, got statues, looks cool.
And the director mentioned, like, some of them are just kind of, like, forgotten and, like, no one gives a shit about it. So, like, they were able to film wherever they wanted in it for the most part.
Nice.
Yeah. Also, fun little note. Caretaker, if I remember right, is from the 70s or the third iteration. Not 100% sure. But his character was actually modeled after Sam Elliott.
Nice.
Oh, I have it actually. No, I wrote this one down.
You wrote it down.
The director mentioned that this character is from the 90s Ghost Rider.
There we go.
And that's another issue, is that he did a lot of cherry picking.
Yeah, so this would be Ghost Rider number 2 then. Because we had Ghost Rider number 1 in the 70s.
Something.
Yeah.
I think this is the third one, because I think we had the 70s, 80s, and then the 90s. Yeah, so
we're a little all over the place, but whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes that can work, but, like, it's really hard to, like, really piece together.
Honestly, I think this character works fine because of how hard this movie tries to lean into the whole Western vibe.
Yeah.
And this character is fully Western.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he works.
He works.
He doesn't feel super weird.
Yeah, and on top of that, Blaze collapses at his father's grave, too.
Which, I mean, okay.
It's just a weird little nod.
It's a weird little nod. It's a little odd that, like, the Carney man is buried here.
Yeah.
But I don't care.
Yeah, because, I mean,
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, he wakes up, and honestly, in my opinion, Cage's best addition to the movie.
Yes.
guzzling the water.
Yes, fully. I love this.
That is his best addition because it does make sense.
It's a very smart little undernote.
Yeah, my skull's on fire, but I'm all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice line. But he meets up with Caretaker, who's working on the grave of Carter Slade.
Yeah.
Which is also a nod to the very first Ghost Rider comic by Marvel, Phantom Rider, where the character's name was Carter Slade.
Again, the people who were in this really liked the comics, and it just didn't translate.
Exactly. And so what I do kind of like about this scene too is it is really setting up that this isn't just a regular Caretaker.
Yeah, no, obviously this is our special mystical Undertaker person.
Yeah, this is the very cheesy horror-esque moment of this is the guy who's going to explain the legend and the backstory.
Yeah. Oh, for 100%. But
yeah.
Again, that's a very Western vibe.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very typical trope. I'm here for it. I like it.
Yep. And Roxy is now investigating the train yard while Blaze is given the backstory by the Caretaker, which is a bit late. We get some exposition explaining of the penance stare and that the last Ghost Rider was created 150 years ago.
And honestly, this little whole prologue, including Roxy, don't care.
Yeah.
Don't care.
No, and it's needed because it does explain the stare, but it also kind of, it sets up that Blackheart is a little bit more of a big deal than we've seen previously, because he mentions well, what would he send you to do? And he's like, I don't know, or not even that, he's like, well, I ran into Blackheart in his gang yesterday, which how the hell does he know his name's Blackheart?
Oh, no idea. No clue. I don't think we get a proper introduction.
Yeah. No, not really.
No.
But maybe it's the contract. It's something that's subconsciously put in his head. It's some stupid shit like that.
It's gotta be something like that.
But it is a nice moment because oh, he sent you after Blackheart.
That sucks, dude.
Yeah, kind of thing. But is what it is, because Blaze immediately goes after being stitched up to go see Roxy, and the police are connecting sulfur poisoning, as well as it starts to bring in a weird religious vibe that doesn't get ever fleshed out.
Honestly, for me, this whole section, honestly, this whole second half,
yeah,
just feels like bad TV drama.
Yeah,
this could have been an episode of Bones, and I would have been like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, this is...
Well, and it's stupid, too, because Blaze shows up. Now he sees the property damage he causes. Roxy gets another bad interview with the girl who's purse mugged, which, by the way, this is an early Rebel Wilson appearance.
Which went on to have a fantastic comedy career.
Yeah, which I guess they tried really hard to get her. They had to have her for that role, and she does it very well.
She's great, I love her.
She reminds me of that YouTube guy who's the goth guy who's and we shall praise our Lord Satan as we... That edgy one. She
definitely properly feels like one of those oh, you've got to see this YouTube video of this interview of this crazy guy who just jumped in and got interviewed talking about how you gotta hide your kids, hide your wife.
Yeah, it's very old school YouTube days.
Yes, which is appropriate.
Yeah,
feels right.
And so Blaze meets up with Roxy. She rightly goes off on him.
Yeah, not enough. She lets him off.
Exactly, because so little bit. Actually, I'll get into it in a minute, because
yes, it's comic book logic.
This is where her as a character is weakest.
Oh, for sure.
Because from there we cut back to Blaze's place where he's testing himself in his mirror, researching his powers, which there's a couple things in this moment. Cage is actually that jacked for this movie.
Which cracks me up, because every review I could find of this movie when I was doing the research was CG abs. Or
CG or body double.
Or doing the bodysuit like they did for a lot of people aren't actually that ripped. It's a plastic prosthetic.
Yeah, or it's Supernatural where they stretch the skin and clamp it back so that way they get the six-pack.
No, Cage was so stoked he worked out 3 hours a day to get this body, and then everyone spent all of the movie being wow, fake abs.
Which the director has mentioned in interviews, the women who are complaining of oh, there's too much tits. And he's
There's a whole shirtless scene.
Yeah, well, and then the next moment they're talking like, oh, did you see Cage? He looks so good.
Yeah.
Like, it's the double standard of, like, objectifying men.
Yeah, and, like, I will say, though, I do appreciate that Cage specifically went into this and was like, okay, I don't really want to get ripped for the transformation scene. I'm not really looking for this to be, like, a love scene. I want it for Johnny's sake. And Johnny would get ripped so he can stand in the mirror and look at himself. Exactly. Which is literally the only time we see Cage without a shirt. Yeah,
it's a stupid moment.
But it's great. It's perfect.
Yeah, because he also did, they mentioned, like, when he was posing and practicing, it was, like, the studio's like, no, you can't do that. That's what the Human Torch does. And they're like, no one's gonna fucking know.
And, like, they did sneak in one quick Human Torch pose.
Yeah.
And they were like, just don't tell anybody.
Yeah, and no one noticed.
No one noticed. Because honestly, like, yeah, fire, but, like, not that much.
Yeah.
One's a skull. It's okay.
Yeah, because now that there's a nice little reference to Faust.
Yeah.
There's a book that he puts aside that's Faust.
Yeah, I mean, the details, again, are there. It's just, did anyone catch them?
Because he's flipping through, like, his religious books, which apparently he's obsessed with, that's never really addressed other than this one moment, really.
Again, there's little things in the background that, like, if you really dig through, you can get.
But they're just few and far and unfulfilling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because after this, Roxy shows up, obviously there for some good times.
Yeah, and also, like, maybe to, like, bitch at him a little more for letting her be hanging at the restaurant.
Not even that, because she's like, I was too hard on you.
Yeah, and, like, this is the weird part for me, because, like, up until this point, she was, like, the go-getter young entrepreneur doing...
I hate you.
Yeah. She was that. And now, all of a sudden, she feels bad that her last words to him were going to be mean. Like, granted, we didn't get a lot of character backstory before this, because she was just the love interest.
She still is the love interest.
I know, but, like, it's a weird 180 in character for me that, like,
it doesn't it's there to put her in the place and have Cage drive or Blaze drive her away again.
Yeah, it's weak, but it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, he's opening up because he kind of throws her off. They have a little reminiscing moment before the whole heavy kissing scene.
Yeah.
But he also a question, how the hell does he know what he looks like as Ghost Rider?
I have no idea.
There's a lot of stupid shit like this.
There's a lot of, like, unanswered questions.
But the director also wanted this moment because he wanted to reveal that, like, hey, he's being open and he's driving her away. Like, what if the superhero revealed his secret identity?
I do like that.
Yes.
I do like that at no point is Johnny like, oh, I gotta hide the fact that I'm Ghost Rider. Like, he just hasn't gotten around to telling the news yet, is really the only thing.
It's just not executed well like Iron Man.
Yeah, but unlike Iron Man, whose character-wise made sense for him to be like, by the way, I'm Iron Man.
Yeah.
Ta-ha-ha. Like, this one does a nice little dance around the whole, like, is the secret identity a thing? It's not even really a secret, but it's also not a not secret. It's just not an issue.
Well,
it's not a problem that the character has to solve in this movie, and I'm okay with that, because I don't care.
I also think what puts it at odds is that I did forget to mention that the police are starting to connect him to the property damage because they found his license plate.
Yeah, whatever.
And it's like from a bike that's not even his. Like, it's just...
It's an old bike that he crashed and probably doesn't ride anymore. Like,
yeah. I mean, they show up and it's just an excuse to throw him in the old pokey.
Which, I mean, does lead to a good scene, so whatever.
Yeah, because, I mean, they question him. There's some weird shit that happens.
A good cop, bad cop bullshit. It's tropey. It's fine.
Fire's drawn to him.
It's dumb. It's fine.
Yeah, because in the cell at night, in the presence of evil, Blaze transforms, and the Ghost Rider upgrades his equipment.
Yes, he does. And I'm torn, because the critic in me says all of this is bad, but the 13-year-old in me was like, that was so cool.
And I think I have an answer for that. Mm-hmm. So I do like the scene to a point, because I think what killed it for me is in the commentary, the director mentions that this scene was supposed to, like, teach the audience that evil was the real trigger, because there's that one kid who's like,
innocent or whatever.
Innocent.
Sure.
But I think part of the issue with that is that the director doesn't give the audience enough credit to understand the triggers.
Yeah.
And
I feel like we already knew that.
Yeah, because he mentioned that the real things are like, he back and forth between like, for the comic people, for not the comic people. Honestly, you could get rid of the entire cop angle in this movie and just make it about him chasing down these outlaws.
I completely agree, but I think they were trying really hard to avoid the anti-heroes that they had done rather recently.
Yeah.
Which took that angle pretty much entirely.
Yeah.
And so, like, I get it.
It would have been better if they had made it more of a presence of him on the run from the law.
Oh, for sure. Like, make him an outlaw.
Yeah, while he's still chasing the outlaws of hell.
Oh, yeah, no. Make him a proper, like, Western-style outlaw. Put a bounty on him. That would have been great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so... And from this, we cut to a quick scene at St. Michael's Church where Blackheart is waiting, and we get the first reference at the fact that he's... this is really the only thing we get to tie him that he's different, because he mentions that he's a Nephilim.
Yeah, yeah, great. Most people don't know or care.
Yeah, and for some, there was some conflict of interpretation of what a Nephilim actually is.
Of course.
But for our purposes, this is the offspring of an angel and a fallen human woman.
Okay, great. So he's not really fallen.
Yeah, which is why he's not bound by his dad.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like we could have picked a better way to explain this.
And
But whatever.
This scene only serves as a purpose to like draw the movie out and give Blackheart a direction to send him to Caretaker. Like it's a stupid moment.
It is, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah. And in the meantime, the bike bursts out of holding as the cops try and stop Blaze, which there is a cool line in this moment.
I agree.
The line, "Raise no more devils than you can lay down."
Yes, love that. The hate it.
It's so stupid.
Yeah. You don't like it either.
You didn't say the magic word. Shut up, Charlie. But yeah, I mean, Ghost Rider escapes. We learn his bike can ride over water. He defies gravity.
I mean, it's cool. It's cool, and 13-year-old me thought this was the dopest thing I've ever seen.
It's still a cool scene.
It is, and like, honestly, this brings me back into like, oh yeah, this is a superhero movie.
Yeah, but it's also just disappointing because we have all this cool shit happens, and then like, he whips Air Dude, and then he creates a tornado with his whip, and it's like, there's no challenge, there's no battle.
There's no challenge, there is no battle. The way he defeats him is very comic booky, though.
Yeah, which it is a cool way to end it, but there's nothing that leads up to him figuring it out. Oh no, I wish we could have had like
more battle.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
And then for some reason, Roxy realizes he's telling the truth because there's fire going up this building.
I appreciate that her brain works fast enough to realize that, because boy, that late at night, me would have been like, wow, that building's on fire. That
late
sucks.
At night, packing, getting ready to leave. Like,
no, yeah, I would not have been like, oh, my weird not boyfriend is not lying about the whole monster thing.
Yeah,
I would have been like, wow, that building's on fire. That sucks for them.
Yeah, because he drops down from the building, which is a cool shot.
Oh, it's very cool.
Which was not supposed to be part of the movie, but was added because it was originally done just for promotional work.
But it's so cool.
Yeah, and this is sadly one of the best parts of the movie kind of thing.
It also, like, the director was talking about how the bike isn't just, like, 90-degree falling. Mm-hmm. It does kind of a leap. Yeah. Which kind of reinforces the idea that, like, the bike is a horse sort of, like, jump. Oh, so good. It looks so cool.
It rules by its own laws of physics because it's not technically part of the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the in-between.
Yes.
It's like Constantine.
I love Constantine.
I know you do.
I love Constantine.
We'll get to that at some point, too.
We will definitely.
Because, yeah, I mean, he escapes. I mean, it's
fine.
It's just,
I mean, it was cool visuals, and then we move on to the next chapter.
Because he goes back to the cemetery to confront Caretaker as the cops confront Roxy.
It very much feels like they took a lot of issues, like individual episodes, issues, however you want to describe it. Like, they feel very broken. Like, each scene feels very individual, Like, stay tuned next week to find out what happens to Roxy.
Same school time, same school channel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because, I mean, from that we cut back to Caretaker. We learn a little bit of his backstory and, like...
Blah, blah, blah. Surprise. Everyone knew exactly who he was the whole time.
Yeah, we learn he was the opposite of Blaze, where, like, Caretaker did it for selfish reasons, but Blaze did it for somewhat pure, which
somehow makes him better.
Which is why I don't like the director saying that, like, Ghost Rider's kind of like this purish character because
bullshit.
Blaze did it for backward selfishy ways.
Like eventually he got to the right answer, but he did the math wrong.
Exactly. And from this moment, we cut back to Roxy, who has turned up at Johnny's place, and his buddy has decided to join forces with her.
Yeah, it's weird. It's whatever.
Yeah.
It's mostly just so we can, oh no, Buddy's dead.
Yeah, because Blackheart shows up, because Blaze is on his way back. Blackheart confronts Caretaker, who is... I do like this moment because Blackheart is definitely throwing like a temper tantrum.
Oh, yeah,
He's like a toddler.
It's good.
But we, from there, immediately cut right back to the apartment, and Blackheart kills the friend and assaults Roxy as Blaze shows up, only to be put in his place, like turns Ghost Rider, and then it's like this is the only time he's challenged, and he's not even really that challenged. He just like kind of gets put in his place a little bit.
Yeah, and the magic that rules, like, you have to do, like, there's no law.
Yeah,
there's no like loophole to find. There's just like, oh, he's strong.
Yeah, because how the hell did Blackheart know where Blaze lived? And
that's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, but I do like this moment because it does establish that Blackheart doesn't have a soul, and so Ghost Power's like one good power doesn't work on him.
Yeah, which, I mean, I'm down for a challenge, but I feel like we could have defined the rules of the challenge a little more.
Yeah.
And maybe like added to it. It doesn't feel very challenging.
It's like, no, you work for me now kind of shit.
Yeah, and like, I don't get any proof of that literally at all.
Yeah, because, I mean, we cut from there to Blaze returning to the Caretaker, who has hidden the San Venganza contract in his shovel, but...
I mean, okay, I understand how that's clever, but...
It's stupid.
It's a little dumb.
It's very dumb.
It's how strong is that shovel?
Hide it in the grave. That would have been cooler.
Or, I don't know, do a double bluff and be like it was in the church the whole time. Just in the Bible.
Yeah.
Like a double bluff like that. I get it, the symbolism of the shovel, like, that's kind of clever. Like, no one would look in the shovel. But also, like, it's fine.
Yeah. No, it is. It was.
It's at least clever that, like, they didn't spend 30 minutes digging a hole. Yeah,
and I'll get to that in just a minute, because I like Caretaker as a character. I just feel he's underutilized, because now the parrot, he's turned into his Ghost Rider form, and I mean,
he's cool. He looks dope. His horse is cool. I like it.
They're off to a town that's 500 miles away, because you better ride fast, boy.
I do wish a little bit that the Ghost Horse would have been animated a little different. Because the way that the Ghost Horse runs, yes, fast, not hell fast.
No.
It's just out for a nice evening jaunt.
Yeah.
Like, it's going, but, like, it doesn't feel like he's, Paul Revere trying to get nowhere.
Yeah. And here is my, where I had my question of, how are their clothes not burned?
Hell magic. I don't know.
It's stupid.
It is stupid.
It's just my little, like, I had that moment because, like, some of Caretaker's clothes are, like, singed, but, like...
Okay, so some of Caretaker's clothes looks like Caretaker's been shot with a shotgun, which is cool, but, like, none of those rules apply anywhere else.
That would be kind of cool, because, like, that would show, like, Ghost Rider's ensemble changes as he goes through shit of, like, getting shot, instead of, like, the T-1000 where, like, he fixes glues back together.
Yeah, like, if that was the rules, cool, love it, but it's not the rules.
Yeah, it's just maybe something us.
It'd be nice.
Yeah, exactly. And so they get to the ridge, and unfortunately, this is where my gripes with Caretaker's character is. He only really serves as, like, a guide.
Yeah, he's boring.
He only had one transformation left. And
then why leave? Well, stay transformed, go fight.
He passes the unholy shotgun to Blaze.
Which, okay, good. Mm-hmm. Shotgun, nice Western motif again. But again, I feel like we could have been like, all right, I'm going to run in there and distract him for you, boy. Mm-hmm. Do your best. This is my last ride.
Go down guns a-blazing. Instead
he doesn't feel like a Western cowboy. He feels like...
Like the little... piddly, the least he could do to be redemptive.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because, I mean...
if you wanted to dig into more, like, maybe there's some symbolism in there, but, like, I didn't get it.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as I like his disappearing into the desert, it reminds me a lot of, like, High Plains Drifter, which is, like, one of my current favorite classic Western, spaghetti Western classics. But, like, it's just, he is so underutilized.
He's so underutilized.
Yeah, because at this point, Blackheart senses them and sends the water dude to, kill Blaze, but he distracts him again for another whole 10 seconds. And, like...
Yeah, no,
they're just bodies to put in his way.
Which, if that's what they are, fine. But at that point, like, maybe have more of them?
Yeah.
Or have them have lackeys, too? Like, it just doesn't feel well thought through.
Exactly.
This plan wasn't thought through.
Well, and they did mention, like, they were constantly having to make changes, and, like...
Oh, for sure.
Because in this part, like, after he kills the water elemental dude, there's a part where, like, the last little remnant of the bike potentially being sentient that was cut from the rest of the movie is still there.
Yeah, it's odd.
Yeah, because now we get to the final showdown in the haunted San Venganza.
Which, I like the background. Mm-hmm. Again, good Western motif. Very cool, very spooky. The bad guy, Blackheart, meh.
Yeah, well, and so I'm going to get into this in just a bit. Because, for one, this whole thing is a set that was shot in a cleared out meat locker.
Which, I mean, knowing that, really good.
Yeah.
Looks great.
I like that it feels very set-like.
Yes.
Because, for starters, the sun starts rising, the timer is set. It's a very interesting take on, like, high noon instead of, like, high morning, very classic Western showdown.
Oh, the vibe is perfect.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great stuff that comes for it. And the Blackheart transformation to Legion is cool.
Yes.
Like, there's some cool parts, but... And Cage blasting away with a shotgun, it feels very Mad Max.
Like, no, visually, it looks great. Logistically, doesn't really compute.
Yeah, because, I mean, the fight's over pretty quickly, too, because... I mean,
super fast.
There's some cool parts also, because, like, knowing that the guy who played Blackheart, the jerking moments are actually done by him, like, they're not, like, put in afterwards.
Like,
and,
that's
like,
so cool.
He pulled muscles doing it.
Like, it looks... great.
Mm-hmm. And the shifting faces of Legion is really cool because
very much.
They said they didn't want it to be Halloween masky, but and I like that now that he's taken all the souls. That's how he's accepted. Like, that's his kryptonite now, because now instead of suffering like the horrible things one person's done, he has the contract of 1,000 souls in him.
Yes. Very cool. Love it.
But what pisses me off so much is the director mentions that he even wishes he had a larger fight.
Yeah.
Which
it's short. And even though all these cool things happen, they happen super fast. Mm-hmm. Like, our fight scene is over and done with.
Yeah.
In like 5 minutes.
Honestly, I feel like this movie is in many ways a prototype for like what Iron Man became at times.
Yeah, there's definitely some overlap.
Because that big thing of like the final fight scene in Iron Man of them flying up into space of like, oh, this is that one critical flaw that you forgot about. Same with like why Blackheart was so good over Ghost Rider. He's now lost that.
Yes.
That mech suit was bigger, but they didn't think through the problems that Tony Stark thought through, kind of thing.
Yes.
And that's the thing too, is like Ghost Rider is so reaction based. But that's what's cool about this scene too, is like they're kind of working symbiotically together like Venom.
Very much so. And I think a lot of my qualms would have been solved, even though I like the elementals a lot. If we had gotten rid of them and had him just fight the one guy 4 times.
Yeah.
And then finally won the 4th time, it would have felt more satisfactory.
Yeah, it's very much like in RPGs when you get that next piece of equipment. Because
Yes.
that is the thing, is like every confrontation, he's using some new type of equipment that he's acquired,
it feels
something
very
that's changed.
tutorial.
Yeah, it's exactly that is the whole. I think that's the biggest issue, is that the entire movie feels like that, though.
Yeah.
And it's not like in a good origin story method, it's just kind of there. Because even after the, not even death, because Legion doesn't really die kind of thing.
No, he just goes back to hell.
Yeah. We get the final confrontation with Mephistopheles, which that would have been cooler if Mephistopheles was like the end all be all, like, oh yeah, he beat this guy, but instead of like that anime RPG the boss transforms, there's an even bigger baddie behind him.
Exactly, that would be cool.
Because technically Mephistopheles doesn't have a soul either, because
there's some loopholes we could have played with.
He said he's not going to give up the contract because he's going to keep the power, and he's going to prevent him from making any other deals, and he'll become the spirit of vengeance.
Which, again, dope, very cool. A lot of plot holes.
Yeah, it just ends too quickly, because after that, Blaze and Roxy go to meet up on the hill one last time.
And I mean, it's once again, chunk of cheddar cheese.
Yeah,
it's cheesy, but like it doesn't meld with anything else.
Yeah, because after that, Caretaker reads the epilogue as Blade rides off into the sunset and then rides into the camera where he transforms into Ghost Rider.
Looks dope.
It's a stupid ass moment though too.
Oh no, it's 100% stupid, but it feels like a proper like comic book ending, like especially with him as the skull at the end, feels like the back of a comic book. Mm-hmm. Which I get, but again, this movie wasn't advertised necessarily to comic book people. Yeah. And like, you went into it being like, well, I don't need to know the comic book stuff. And like, that was kind of also the standard then too. Because like, we had well past the point in movie history of like, oh, this is based off the comic book, I hope you've read it. Yeah. Like, we were well past that point. People just went to go see these and just didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's Ghost Rider. I mean, it opened with, at number 1, and set a record for a 4-day President's Day weekend at $52 million in 3,619 screens.
And honestly, when I watched it, like back in the day, I thought this movie was dope as hell. Yeah. I still think this movie's dope as hell. But like, when we all were watching it, none of us were thinking about these problems in the movie. Yeah. Because again, we hadn't reached a point where action/superhero movies, especially anti-hero movies, were done with a level of quality. Yeah. Like, this was the quality. And
I mean, where I was at, because I remember seeing it. I don't remember my thoughts on it. I know I brought up to Christian that I was going to be doing this one. He's like, oh yeah, I remember hating that movie like when I was 11 and like leaving the theaters and thinking it was stupid then too. Yeah. But like, I mean, for me, and part of the reason I probably don't remember is because like this was at like in high school, the very starts of like me getting into movies without knowing I was into movies. I was very focused on horror films.
And this movie gets dangerously close, but it's not. It's not one.
And it was just also like one of those movies like, oh yeah, the movie's out. We have nothing to do this week, and let's go on base and see it, because I was in Italy. Yeah. And I mean, as successful as it was, I mean, it's kind of mainly been negatively criticized.
Which I get, especially nowadays, especially after the success of things like the X-Men movies, or Batman movies, or even Superman's movies. Yeah. Like, yeah, this one looks weak in comparison.
Yeah, and like, especially the very first X-Men, which was a solid movie.
Yeah, and like visually, like competed with this movie visually, but also like, granted, if you were a comic book reader, tons of plot holes. But otherwise, if you were just going in blind, you felt like this was a complete story, well thought through, all the details done. Yeah. And then it wasn't until later that they realized they shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, and Nic Cage was nominated for a Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Actor, which I didn't see what else he was up against.
I mean, and who won, I feel like he gets nominated frequently.
Yeah. I mean,
it's Nic Cage.
To be fair, he has been in a lot of bad stuff. But I think part of the other issue too is like the director, like he said, fuck the critics. He decided to make the movie for entertainment purposes, and he kind of made it for himself. There are parts to it, but like
is this like the cinematic masterpiece? No, but like does this movie, like, if it's on, will you watch it? Of course you're gonna watch it. Like, this movie's good, like, it is pleasing to watch.
Yeah. And, I mean, it did well enough to get a sequel in 2011.
Which honestly, like, I don't know if you've seen the sequel.
I have.
Okay, good. Is the sequel plot-wise better? No.
No.
It's worse.
The sequel is a steaming pile of garbage.
It is. But what this movie did do is I think it really started to pave the way for proper anti-hero movies.
Yeah.
Because, like, we did eventually get Constantine.
Yeah.
Which, very similar vibes, very similar visuals.
Yep.
But done in a completely different way.
Yeah. And here's the thing. So I think if Spirit of Vengeance had been released first, it would have done better. It would have hit that little niche. But it's still not a very good movie because of everything that came before.
Oh, 100%.
And even then, like, it did well enough to, like, rumor a third installment. But maybe luckily at this point, Cage said he's done with the character currently. In 2013, he said this.
Yes. And Cage is, however you feel about it, Cage is one of those actors where, like, the likelihood of Cage being willing to reprise this role is going down every year. Yeah. Not because he doesn't want to do it, but because he sees the character separate from himself. Yeah. And he wants that character to be a certain level, and he might no longer see himself as playing that character.
He did the Johnny Blaze one.
Exactly.
And here's the thing. I think, and I agree with Cage, I think Ghost Rider is primed for a comeback.
Oh, for sure.
Because, so, for starters, one, I think there should be a nod to Cage. I think he should have a bit part if it comes up again.
I would love to see him as, like, the new Undertaker sort of character.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, there has been some updates. Because even though the film franchise is pretty much dead at this point,
it is.
In 2013 there was the rights actually transferred back to Marvel. And the only thing we've gotten since then in 2016 was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., though it's based off the 2014 Robbie Raisy incarnation. Which, I mean... And not the 70s Blaze.
Honestly, though, like, that's not the worst. At least the character's still going.
Yeah, and, I mean, on top of that, I mean, as a little side note, this got a PS2 and a Game Boy Advanced adaptation.
Which back then was pretty good. The PS2 is pretty good. Game Boy, everyone had a Game Boy Color.
I watched Game Boy Advanced.
Oh, yeah, everyone got one.
I did see that they both have kind of like mixed reviews. I watched some gameplay. The Game Boy Advanced bike portions do pull off the Akira slide.
Okay, alright.
Again, we keep mentioning Akira.
But I mean, like, the standard for bike movie.
Yeah, which the games are very much Devil May Cry-like.
Of course they are.
Well, one's like Devil May Cry-like. The other's like Dragon Ball Z side-scroller shit.
Of course it is. I expect no less.
But, I mean, Ghost Rider, back when it was released, and this is what I was trying to get to, like, despite all, like, how much hype it had, all the fallout it's had to. I mean, Marvel wanted Ghost Rider to be, like, the tentpole movie. It wanted to be, like, the Iron Man and not the genre piece, when it should have been a genre piece.
Yes, I agree.
If they had really embraced either the horror, like one or the two of, or if they had only embraced the horror western, those have been done pretty well. Yeah. They just tried to make it too much of a comic book.
Yeah, they did.
Without like, well,
they didn't lean one way or the other.
Exactly. Or like fully embrace it because they tried being too realistic, like Daredevil.
Yeah,
definitely. And I can see why they wanted this really to be the like true start to the superhero movie build-up, because I mean we had Daredevil, which was fine. Yeah, it was fine. Good enough to spawn a spin-off.
Yeah,
but
it did.
Before this, we have to look at where we were at. We originally had Howard the Duck, which still have not seen but heard it's horrible.
It's laughably bad.
But at this point, we have the first 3 X-Men movies. The first 2 of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy.
So good.
Fantastic Four, Punisher, the first Hulk movie, which I know is bad.
It is, but like it is worth a mention because the first Hulk movie really starts off the universe part of Marvel.
And of course, Elektra and Daredevil we mentioned. But here's the thing: we are still, and this is why I wanted to bring this up, because the history of like where Ghost Rider falls is kind of interesting because we're still a year away from the beginning of the current Marvel Cinematic Universe and Iron Man, which, looking back, that was 13 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Before Ghost Rider, we had 21 years of movies, and I'm only looking at Marvel and the live actions because there's a whole other rabbit hole.
Of course there is.
14 live action adaptations.
Not a lot.
The 13 years since Iron Man, we've had 45 movies based off Marvel properties, and another 8 in pre-production or post-production, with 2 being filmed at the moment as well. And this is also excluding any other Marvel imprint such as Kick-Ass, Kingsman, Men in Black, Big Hero 6, and all the direct-to-video titles or animated franchises.
Let alone the TV specials, Netflix specials, all that sort of stuff.
If Ghost Rider had come out post-Iron Man...
Oh, it would have done amazing.
Exactly.
It would have done spectacular.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The director said he didn't feel Ghost Rider has been used in the right way. I still don't feel he has.
I fully agree. I think this got close.
Mm-hmm.
I think the potential is there, but... And I know you haven't seen it, and I'm going to revisit it.
Mm-hmm.
So we eventually got Constantine the movie, which revisits these themes, does so a little bit more elegantly, does so a little bit better. Later on, we got a TV version of it.
Yeah.
Which, for some people, not as good. For me, exceedingly better.
Yeah, I know you love the TV show, and
to the point that I own it.
Yeah, and I mean, I've only seen the Keanu one, which I didn't even know was a comic book movie until...
Which I think is probably the best way to, go into it. Because neither's bad. They're just different. And honestly, I think after that point in cinematic world, if after Supernatural had hit its peak, not done its decline yet, just at its peak.
Yeah, season 3, maybe season 4.
Yeah. If this movie had come back in and was starting its point then, I think this movie would have been different.
Yeah.
Because we hadn't fully developed these themes yet. Yeah. And granted, we're pulling from a comic book. Those themes are theoretically already developed, but I don't think movie-wise we hadn't gotten to that point, had we, Charlie? We hadn't gotten to a point where these themes are colloquial understood. What? Are you starving?
I apologize, listeners. We are recording a little bit late. Actually, this is a long episode, and we are actually kind of close to Charlie's feeding time, so I apologize.
I'm so hungry. But, and whether or not you like it, Supernatural did do something to everyone's collective understanding of the bounty hunter, anti-hero, gothic western style, revised ideas of that. Yeah. And this movie would have done spectacularly after that point. Exactly. Unfortunately, though, or fortunately, it was the guinea pig.
Yeah. And
with all that said, this is still one of my favorite movies. I still love this movie. It's just bad.
I know you love this movie. And, I mean, I personally think Ghost Rider would have been better. It's better as an examination from, the nerdy stuff and, the little tiny horror references and little things that we picked apart and, tried to pull in, but, they don't go anywhere. And that's the unfortunate thing, because, and at the same time, while I appreciate Cage isn't afraid to be embarrassed, I think Ghost Rider's oddest moments heavily stem from Cage and the director not knowing when, or not necessarily Cage, but the director not knowing when to reel Cage back, as well as not like I said, there's very few movies where when you're in production, you're editing constantly, that actually work out well, because that part where I'm sure maybe the elementals had a bigger showdown part, but he had to start killing them off right away because the Earth dude had to be erased because Spider-Man 3. And I just think I say for people to go back and this will be my conclusion, I guess. Mm-hmm. I would recommend not necessarily going back to watch Ghost Rider. I personally am not a fan of it. But it is interesting in seeing the history and the transition of superhero movies just on the cusp of just hitting popular culture.
I totally agree.
So, I mean,
for me, I agree with you. I am for good or bad, I'm in the camp of most of the time I'm not a big Marvel cinematic universe person. I like them. I like the characters. I just am not a big fan of watching all of the movies.
Yeah.
So for me, this movie hits a nice sweet spot of being dumb, but trying its damnedest to be serious.
Oh yeah. No.
And so for me, this hits a spot that there's not a lot left for.
Yeah, it hits your nice little niche of like so bad it's good for you.
Exactly. And like this was a genre for a while, and for better or worse, we've outgrown the genre.
Yeah.
And so like I do not expect this type of movie to ever be made anytime soon.
Yeah.
No, at least not from big productions.
Yeah, no, and I mean I do hope they try and revisit this character. I do like the darker characters, but like I don't see it, especially with how poorly this movie has been received, and specifically how poorly the sequel's been.
Yeah, the sequel was bad.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that's what I'll leave Nic Cage November out for Ghost Rider at least. So
fair.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's it. I do want to throw in some housekeeping stuff for our listeners at the end. We were planning on doing a history of swear words, but scheduling and just time conflicts, we don't have the time.
Nope.
And especially, we do have a big project coming up early next year.
Secret project.
We probably won't have any shorts for the next 3 or 4 months. So just
get excited for Secret Project.
Get excited for Secret Project and check us out on Instagram. I'll still be doing our normal written reviews, but we're back down to 2 reviews a month, at least for the next few months. So
yep, just for now.
But anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. Thanks for listening.
Peace.
Wait. Oh, shit. I screwed it up. Nic Cage November's over. Peace, guys.